Good evening. Good evening, and welcome to the July 10th meeting of the Livermore City Council. I now call the meeting to order. I'll let the roll call show that all of the members of the council are present and accounted for. I ask that you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next, ask the city attorney, was there any reportable action taken during the closed session?
Mr. Mayor, no, there was not.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We have no proclamations and presentations tonight. Next, we move on to the Citizens Forum. These are items that are not on the agenda. Give the opportunity for citizens to speak to the council on anything that is not on the agenda. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. The City Council can neither deliberate nor take action on any items brought during the Citizens Forum. So with that, I've got a few cards tonight. We have Robert Freer, David McGuigan, and Nancy Bankhead. Mr. Freer. Good evening.
Hi. So I've got my name is Robert Freer, and I live on South S Street here in Livermore. There's a big problem on 4th Street. There's a house, the address is 1371 4th Street, and they're selling drugs out of it. And it's been going on for quite a while. The police have raided the place, I can count at least 5 times. My neighbor, he is at home all day long. He says that it's been at least 10. They bring people in and out. They arrest people. They're there all the time. And I just want to know what can be done about it. I mean, is it something that, is it just like? I'm at a loss here because there's so many people coming in from the creek right there on South S Street. And, I'm at a loss. There's parking, problems, people coming in and out all hours, and the straw that broke the camel's back the other day was when I saw a woman rolling her stroller into this house with her kids. It got to the point where, my neighbor and I, we actually had to break something up that was right in the middle of the street. I mean, they're so ballsy, they just don't even care anymore about people even noticing. So, we kind of chased them off, and they keep coming back day after day. So I'm just wondering, is it something that's being allowed to happen, or what? I mean,
This is drug sales that are going on, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, do we have a drug house nuisance abatement ordinance in the city, and the city police chief is sitting right behind you.
I've tried calling that. I went to a police officer and asked him what to do, and he said, call the narcotics hotline. No one ever calls him back. No one ever does anything. I don't, you can get a,
If you could give your contact information to the chief, the chief is holding his business card, so you can contact him, and he will. You can check with him, and we do have ordinances in place specifically for this reason.
Okay.
So we will get to work on that. And thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Okay, thank you.
So there's the chief. He's the guy with the large star on his chest. He's easy to find.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for calling that to our attention. Dave McGuigan, Nancy Bankhead, Jason Bezos.
First, let me remind everyone that you can tell that the chief and the mayor are not being entirely honest when they tell you that the officer did nothing wrong, that my complaint was unfounded. Because when I say Officer Christian Starr committed deliberate perjury when he testified he didn't talk to me for the first 40 minutes when he really had my signed statement by that point, it would be slander if the chief and the mayor were being honest. And you can be sure that slander is not protected speech. Now, being a resident of Livermore for many years, I've heard the stories of the police, and I'll have to admit that I had to laugh a little bit under my breath at some of them, thinking, oh, come on, really? That was until I became one of those stories. I could talk about some of the many stories I've heard, the tales of people taking people outside that can be arrested for drunk in public, of officers deliberately ignoring witnesses so they could continue to that would counter the charges. I've even heard of someone framed for burglary because he was dating the officer's ex. But I can't talk about them with authority. I'm not talking about my case because I want it reopened. I'm talking about it because I can talk about it with authority. Remember when I started this, I complained that the police were commandeering personal property for traffic enforcement, how I was pulled over in a car and never given a reason, and my case. The mayor told me to take my complaint to the chief, which I did. Of course, as soon as the investigating officer said, I just want to get this over with, it was clear there would be no detailed and thorough investigation. So when the chief came back with his determination that my complaint was unfounded, I challenged him on how he could make that determination. And then the chief lied about what the officer testified to. And I have to tell you, there are very few things that get me more than being lied to by someone in a public position of power. So yes, I have kept digging into my case because I want to talk, because I can talk to it with authority, and I know when the police are lying to me. And so I do not accept answers that do not address the questions. Let's take the chief's response to what the officer was doing for the 40 minutes. I'll paraphrase him when he says, but it was basically, I don't know, he could have been doing a lot of things. Really, Chief? You would accept that from one of your suspects? You would lower yourself below the dignity of your office. You would not accept it, and you now know that neither will I. Did I tell you how much being lied to by someone in a position of power really, really, really gets my goat? My continued digging did tell me that the police deliberately withheld the audio logs that showed the officer was doing paperwork in the car at the time he says he's initiating his contact with me, something the officer could not do by himself. So the chief going the extra mile to lie is quite understandable, if reprehensible. And let me be clear, I am challenging the determination or the adjudication of my complaint as unfounded. Let me conclude with Officer Christian Starr committed deliberate perjury when he testified that he didn't talk to me for the first 40 minutes when he actually had my signed statement by that point, which you can be sure is not slander.
Next speaker is Nancy Bankhead, Jason Bezos, Loretta Caskey.
Hi,
Ms. Bankhead.
I'm Nancy Bankhead. On the 4th of July, we had a wonderful celebration, a national holiday. Our police had to work that day. They have to because we need to be safe downtown with the 4th of July. And instead of making the officers work and leave their family at home, they had a barbecue on the St. Michael's lawn area. And they brought the families down and made it a family affair and a community affair. And that's what I want from my police chief. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bankhead. Jason Bezos, Loretta Caskey. Mr. Bezos.
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to protest at the February 13th and February 27th meetings. I was cut off in the middle of my presentation during agenda items, and I believe that constitutes viewpoint discrimination that was in violation of my First Amendment rights. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. The related matter. A major piece of, one of the last pieces of 19th century downtown Livermore is now being uprooted. That's the Depot project in downtown Livermore. Most people probably are not aware that it's a $4.1 million project. And that $4.1 million project, they added another $1 million, this current council did, back in February, back in the January 23rd meeting. So I'm holding a $50 bill. That's how much everyone in the city of Livermore, every man, woman, and child, is paying for this depot project, this uprooting of this depot. It's a very historic site. It was ground zero of Livermore. There have been train depots on that site since this community was founded in 1869. This depot has been there since 1892. That's 1/8 of a millennium, 125 years. I want to point out here too, read here from Garavaglia Architecture. They're the historical resources consultant. They said, quote, "This proposed work will have a negative impact on the building's historic environment as the building will be moved from its original site and reoriented roughly 180 degrees. The relocation of the building to a new site will break the connection to its original location and environment and as such destroy the integrity of the historic property and its environment." But yet we have that claim, but then we had a next door, the city was putting out this thing on the next door website saying that this project, quote, "will increase the building's chance for inclusion in the National Registry of Historic Buildings by relocating adjacent and parallel to the railroad tracks." That's not true. I mean, I think the city needs to go put up or shut up about that claim about enhancing National Register status. Now, your city manager, Mark Roberts, said on July 5th, quote, "Staff has reviewed this issue and are confident that the relocation will not have a negative impact on its registry and could help since it's close to to the tracks. I don't really know that that's has any basis in reality, and I really would like some type of proof shown that they've actually consulted with the State Office of Historic Preservation. I also see no 4F analysis or nor federal National Historic Preservation Act analysis, which should have gone with this federal project, $2.5 million of federal funds. And I don't think Alan Frank was accurate at the January 23rd meeting when he said returning it to historically intended service will enhance its eligibility for the National Register of Historic Places, overriding any issues due to its move. It's just not true. You can even look in the National Register Bulletin 15, and you'll see there they have an example of Railroad Depot, and they say you move it, generally speaking, you're going to have trouble with keeping the National Registry. So again, one of the last pieces of historic downtown Livermore, 19th century Livermore, is now going. This is a kind of a sad day for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bezos. Loretta Caskey.
Does this work? Okay. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Loretta Caskey. On Thursday, July 6th, I took a request to the Historic Preservation Commission, and tonight I'm here to request that you direct and support city staff in starting the process of getting the Livermore Southern Pacific Depot application for the National Register of Historic Places started. Several train depots have been moved and restored and then placed on the registers. Here are some examples in the state of California. The Goleta Southern Pacific Railroad Depot, it's a number 22 plan, which was closed in 1973, moved in 1982, and placed on the register in 2002. The Bagby Station House, water tanks, and turntable moved in 1966 and were placed on the register in 1979. The Colfax Southern Pacific Depot was moved twice and still placed on the register in 1999. It underwent a multi-year renovation, resulting in its return to productive use in May 2007. In 2006, the California State Parks Office of Historic Preservation awarded the Governor's Historic Preservation Award to the City of Colfax, Colfax Area Historic Society, and the Placer Sierra Railroad Heritage Society for the rehabilitations of this very same 1905 Southern Pacific Depot. And lastly, I'd like to bring your attention to the City of Shafter's Santa Fe Depot, built in 1917, which was closed for use in 1978. It was relocated in 1980, renovated, and placed on the register in 1982. There's a plaque on the Shafter Depot, which I believe would be an excellent model for a future sign on Livermore's renovated depot. The main points of the plaque are that the building was originally located 4 blocks southeast of its current site. The depot served as Shafter's gateway to the world, as the mail, Western Union Telegraph, express, freight, and rail passengers passed through its doors. The concern for the preservation of the depot led to the formation of the Shafter Historic Society in 1979. The Society, along with the assistance of public and private support, restored the building to its original format. The property was placed on the National Register of Historic Places by the United States Department of Interior in 1982. In summary, I'm requesting your support to begin the work necessary to complete the National Register application. The city knows it can count on the help of the Livermore Heritage Guild with any research or additional resources needed, as was done for Ravenswood, Hageman Ranch, and the Carnegie Library building. And I hope to stay up late or early, depending, to see the city's historic train depot move on Sunday, July 16, between midnight and 4 a.m. Hope to see you there, too.
Thank you, Ms. Caskey. That's all the cards that I have for the Citizens Forum. We'll move on now to the consent calendar. Does anyone wish to have any item pulled from the consent calendar for discussion? Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Moved by the Vice Mayor, seconded by Councilmember Carling.
Coomer.
Oh, Coomer, I'm sorry. I thought you were throwing your voice there.
No,
Somebody.
that I can't do yet.
Okay, so any discussion on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Public hearings. The protests related to non-payment of solid waste recycling and organics handling. We have Judy Erlinson and Marissa Gann presenting the staff report.
Good evening, Mayor Maishon and members of the City Council. My name is Marissa Gann, and I'm the city's recycling specialist. Tonight, the City Council will consider approving lien assessments for the non-payment of services provided by Livermore Sanitation. There are approximately 26,000 accounts serviced by Livermore Sanitation in the city. As of today, there are only 50 residential accounts and 2 commercial accounts that are more than 12 months behind on their payment, making them eligible for lien. The staff report indicates different numbers, but those are from 2 weeks ago, so those are the most up-to-date numbers we have. Despite repeated notifications from Livermore Sanitation, service reductions, and 2 notices from the City of Livermore, the accounts continue to be significantly overdue. Per the franchise agreement and the Livermore Municipal Code, the city is obligated to consider imposing liens for these delinquent accounts. These customers had up until today at 7 p.m. to pay the bill and not have their property liened. Staff continues to observe a decline in the number of liens being proposed this year compared to previous years. 76% of the accounts on this year's list have been liened in previous years. Staff recommends that the City Council consider protests, adopt a resolution overruling protests, and confirm the 2017 lien assessments, directing staff to forward a finalized copy of the assessment report to the county tax assessor. Thank you for your consideration, and staff is available for any questions.
Any questions for staff? Councilmember Warner? I look this way first.
I've got a couple. You said 76% have been on the list in prior years, and I'm looking at the invoice date, the oldest invoice date. I think I only see 15 here. Is that right? Or on this one list I'm looking at? Or it was attachment page. It's page 227.
That's for the previous 12 months. So
Okay.
there are other bills that have not been paid as of earlier dates, but the liens are for the last 12 months.
And so the only recourse we have is to put the lien on here,
That's correct.
right? So what? I'm just curious. What's the oldest past due we have?
It's for calendar year 2016.
Oh no, maybe I'm confused. I thought you said that this is only for the last 12 months, but I thought, are there any other older invoices than the year 15?
No, those have been previously liened.
Oh, that's okay. And then when the lien is done, then it's cleared. Is that what happens?
Yes, it's been
Then
paid by
they
the
pay-
property owner.
Then they pay it up, or it's just a lien there.
Well, it goes on the property taxes. So if they pay their property taxes, then it's satisfied. If they don't pay their property taxes, then it's not paid until the home is sold.
Okay. And do we have any cases of people not paying it through the property tax on top of that?
We haven't followed it that far. I do know there is a subset of people who pay. So yes, I would say there's probably some that haven't paid since we started this process 6 years ago.
Is there any extra costs that we can recover as a result of having to go through this process?
Those costs are recovered as well. Yes.
Okay, so how much cost is it per not paying?
Well, I
Recover.
think in total to lien these properties is about $150 a year for us. So it's the administrative costs aside from staff time is low.
Okay.
No, it was answered because I wonder why we call it a lien anymore when it's not really a lien. It's more of an assessment, because I think that's where you were getting at. Because in the past, you'd put a lien on a property and it would just wait until the property was sold. But this is really a yearly assessment, and if you don't want to pay it, you don't pay your property taxes, you risk losing your house. So anyway, that was the clarification, but taken care of.
So what I would like to know is there anybody that's just then, what fraction of these, any rush, but what fraction of these actually don't pay?
Well, for reference, 40% on the list have never paid. So haven't paid one bill since the start of this
Oh,
contract.
but they pay through the tax.
They may or may not. Some don't pay their taxes. Sometimes the house is sold, so it's satisfied that way. Sometimes they don't pay their taxes for a while and then they pay it. So it varies.
So I'm just curious, the next time we go through this, how, what is not paid eventually? I'm just curious. And because maybe there's some extra fees that ought to be associated with that.
We can find that information out.
No, okay, thanks.
By the time you get to the stage where it has to go to lien, what steps have you taken already to mitigate the loss of the revenue? And usually it's a pretty complicated process and a long-term process, and there's lots of notifications and so on. Could you elaborate about that a little bit?
Sure. So once the account is 30 days past due, Livermore Sanitation reaches out to them and sends them a past due invoice. And at 60 days, then they are re-notified as well as the property owner. Livermore Sanitation reduces services. They take away the recycling and the organics cart and reduce their garbage can down to a 32-gallon. They're not eligible for the other programs that Livermore Sanitation offers, such as the on-call bulky cleanup. They get a letter from the city twice, and they were mailed this year, March 21st and June 9th, to both the property owner and the tenants, if that's applicable. And so they are told multiple times about this late assessment.
So it's dealt with kind of passively. It's not an aggressive collection operation. It's a passive kind of way of, check your mail and we don't have any collection calling or anything on these, do we?
The city doesn't make calls, but Livermore
This
Sanitation
wasn't my
does.
business. I get it.
Nobody knocks on their door.
Yeah, exactly,
but-
yeah.
So we don't go quite that far.
Okay.
But
I
there
just
are
didn't
phone
know.
calls. They reach out to the customer. Livermore Sanitation does.
Awesome. Thank you.
I've got one follow-up on that. I don't believe the 150 costs for the process you just described. It seems to me like it's more. All those letters and everything else.
That's only the amount that the consultant charges us to forward the information to Alameda County. So Livermore Sanitation absorbs the cost of the letters and all of those things. That's on them.
So this is where I'm trying to follow. But it ultimately isn't on them. It's on the rest of us, right? Because because it gets passed through. It's not a free ride. So I'm just requesting that we rethink the true costs of this hassle and it be appropriately paid for by the people who are causing the hassle.
There are late fees charged, but we can do a further analysis and find out how much it costs to send the letters. I mean, we're talking about 60 households, so a couple businesses. So, but we can come back with that information.
Councilmember Carling?
I just have one question about the past due accounts. Some 26. I don't know whether that's the still number 26 or tenant occupied residences, right? In the staff report, I don't know whether that's still true or not. I may have been lower than that, but no. But my question doesn't have to do with the number. But is there ever any confusion between the tenant and the owner of the residence as to who is supposed to pay? Does that happen?
It happened more in the past. We found a significant decline in leaning tenant-occupied properties because we've done so much outreach to
Okay.
the landlords and the property managers that are out there.
So from your point of view, it's clear, mostly, 99% or something like that, that as to who is responsible for the paying the bill.
Yes, we've worked very closely with many of
Okay.
these property owners, and many have
Great.
dropped off because of our efforts. So.
Okay, good. All right, thanks.
I thought was remarkable was that some of these are between $7 and $10, and when you consider all the administrative hassle that goes into trying to recoup that, it's I think again it's remarkable. Any other questions or comments for staff at this point? Okay, we're going to open the public hearing to hear any protests. I have no cards, so with that, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the council. Any discussion of the council? Do you have a motion?
I move we accept staff recommendation.
Moved by Councilmember Carling,
I'll second.
accepted by Councilmember Warner. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, moving on to 5.02. This is the certificate of appropriateness on the former Wagner Winery. Scott Lee is the staff member. Okay.
Thanks for your patience. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. The certificate of appropriateness application involves the proposed demolition of a brick masonry building built in the 1890s. The building was originally built for the Wagner Winery, but has been vacant for the last couple of decades. Last year, the City Council approved the certificate of appropriateness application, subject to conditions recommended by the Historic Preservation Commission, as well as new conditions imposed by the council. At a subsequent meeting, the council requested to reconsider the application and decided to remand the application back to the Historic Preservation Commission for further analysis. Since the last time the council considered the application, the city hired a historic preservation consultant to complete a historic resource evaluation of the subject property. In addition, staff completed an initial study and a mitigated negative declaration in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act for the project. At this time, I'd like to introduce Stacy DeShazo, she's to my right, the city's historic preservation consultant, who will provide a brief summary of the historic resource evaluation. Ms. DeShazo is co-owner and principal architectural historian of Evans DeShazo and DeShazo. She has 17 years of experience in historic preservation work. Ms. DeShazo is also chair of the Santa Rosa Cultural Heritage Board and an adjunct professor at Sonoma State University. So with that, she'll walk you through the evaluation.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. And thank you, Mayor and City Council members. I appreciate you inviting me here today to present this project. So I know that you've seen this before, but you haven't seen this final historic resource evaluation on the project. So what I'm going to do is just go over a little bit about the Wagner Winery project in reference to the historic resource evaluation that we conducted this last spring. So this is just to familiarize yourself, and I think you all know it well, is what's left of the Wagner Winery project, which is the barn that's familiar to folks traveling through Livermore. And the current condition survey is something that we do often. What we'll look at when we're asked to come in and do an updated historic resource evaluation. As you know, sometimes evaluations are done many years before. So it can be 20 years before, it can be 15, it can be 5. But what you really want to do is when you're assessing properties, particularly if they're requesting a demolition permit or there's some significant change to the property, you'll want to get an updated historic resource evaluation so you can check on the current condition. So the first historic resource evaluation, as you may know, was done by Bonnie Bamberg, who did a lot of actual HRIs back in the 80s and the 90s. And she did the city of Livermore. So then when Carey & Co. came along, what I found was that evaluation was not truly an evaluation, it was an identification. So what happened with the Carey & Co. Sort of inventory was they came in, took a look at the building. It was really kind of what we call a windshield survey, but also can be called a reconnaissance survey. It's not really an evaluation, and they just confirmed from a visual that the building's still there. So the city knows what's in their inventory; it's still there, but it's not considered an evaluation under CEQA. So there's that one in 2003, and then in 2017 is when we completed our historic resource evaluation. The 1988 Historic Resource Inventory, which was a great inventory done by Bonnie, there were additional buildings on the site. So, as you know, the Wagner Winery consisted of actually several buildings, and back in '88 there was a cluster of 1 and then 2-story brick buildings. There were also different, sort of a different look and feel, so your context. So when you're out there, you might have still felt that you were in sort of a rural area, or that there was some sort of, winery production or some sort of business going on there. During that time, the building was occupied, and it was likely in a different condition. And from the photos that I saw and all the research that I've done, it did look quite different. In the updated DPR, which was done in 2003, which was done for the Livermore Downtown Specific Plan, is usually often, and you folks probably know this, most cities, if you're going to do a specific plan for downtown, you want to take another inventory of what you have and what you can do and what you want to do in the future so you can plan things out. So this is very typical. Unfortunately, the updated DPR form did not actually evaluate the building. It only documented. It did leave out that the rest of the buildings on site were gone. So it is my understanding that there was a fire, and so the context within that property had been reduced to just the one single barn. So when we came along and conducted the updated historic resource evaluation, was very project specific, so that's what we do under CEQA. And we gave a current evaluation with an intensive level survey, which means I was out there on the ground looking at the context of the building and the building within the property, and then the properties around the building, including the addition of the automotive buildings, which do create an issue in regards to context and integrity. The other thing is that we provide the evaluation within the Secretary of Interior standards. We also go through CEQA, and we also provide recommendations. So what we usually look at in regards to the California Historic Resource Status Code, I know the code originally had indicated when Bonnie had conducted the survey back in the 80s that it was likely eligible for the California Register. And there are reasons for that. So that's why, back then it could have been, but today is a quite different story. So you look for broad indicators. There's a sort of starting place of what you look at. You also want to understand that although we're professionals, there is also a bit of opinion involved in regards to, what a property looks like and where it may fall. Also, eligibility, may or may not accurately reflect. When you're doing historic resource inventories, you have to always remember the word inventory. And often there's, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of properties that are done, and the time and the care that's needed to do an actual historic resource evaluation is not done on those. So to get you to the level of a true historic resource evaluation, you need to be looking at things like the context, which is the history of the property, the history of the family, and then in the context of the resource. So there's a little bit of difference, and the evaluation is what's necessary for a proposed demolition. So as you all know, and I don't know how many council members have been inside the building, but it is in significantly deteriorated state. In regards to, I do not and have not seen any interior photos from prior to when Bonnie Bamberg was in there. I've seen a few, but the state of the building is pretty significantly deteriorated, and although it has been modified as well. A lot of the features that would define it or speak to you that it was a former building that supported a winery or winery production have long been gone. And it's been in use with different businesses, since I believe the 50s. This is part of a shed addition, which was not original, and then you see all these sort of concrete forms that would encase some tanks. Some of this is not original to the building and would not have been there, but was added at some point. And this is just one of the corners, so you can see a little bit about the deterioration and the issues with the materials and the current state. And then you can see the addition on the side, the little shed addition there. This is an up close, just to see what you're dealing with. A lot of these are what we really focus on when we're looking at a current condition. So something does not have to be in pristine condition to be considered a historical resource. So that is not, we don't just look at, oh, some bricks are missing or, a door's missing. But you do look at the overall picture and the overall property. So there is the front that you've all seen, and it's currently fixed in. A lot of the vines, and just to bring this up, just because I have to, if anyone can avoid it, please do not have vines and trees and plants crawling up your masonry, because it'll only eat it away and destroy it, especially masonry. And there have been modifications here. You can see the changes to the windows. There's a lot of issues with the way that the building originally looked and the way it looks today. So this is really important when we talk about context. So what we do when we're looking at a property that was not just a barn, but associated with a larger winery sort of complex, sort of like you can look at it like a mill property. If there's 10 components to the mill property and there's one small building left on the mill property, it's very hard to convey significance with just one of the mechanisms of that property still standing. Also, you want to look around in your neighborhood to see if that you still have that sort of same feeling, and that these types of properties do better, as you know. And I have a lot of I inventoried Napa County. There's a lot of buildings that convey a significance because they're all out left on their own, and they still have their context as far as the landscape and the way things look and the way things feel. So this is the adjacent property that was developed, and Scott, what year was this developed? Do you know?
Mid-2000s.
Okay. So this was the adjacent parcel. So this also is an indicator of the changes. So when I'm out there, I'll look at the surrounding structures, what's there, what's been allowed to be put around it as the city grows, which is natural. I mean, this is all, same part of any kind of city that would have something like this happen. What happened? All right, take me back. I think there was only one slide left. That's a good though too. I think that was the last one. There. So thank you. Thank you. Anyway, I wanted to give you that brief presentation so you would just sort of refresh your memory and an overview of what you're looking at, and give you an idea of what I do and what the difference is between what's on the record, which is the Bamberg, and the Carey & Co. And what I did. So the extensive historic resource evaluation is something that you want to do in regards to something that's going to change, especially in a demo. But you always want to be diligent and make sure that you've covered all your bases and that you're answering all the questions, and that you're doing right by the city. So anyway, I want to thank you, and I'm ready for questions when you are.
So just to conclude staff's presentation, so the historic resource evaluation concluded that the project or the property no longer meets the eligibility criteria for listing on the California Register. That's the 3S designation, which signifies that it may be eligible, is no longer appropriate, that it should really be rated 6Z because of the diminished integrity and loss of historic character defining features, as well as the loss of appropriate site context, as Stacy had mentioned. So that's the conclusion of the evaluation. But however, staff acknowledges that there are past cultural history to the property. So for that reason, staff has recommended a number of conditions to approving this certificate of appropriateness. And they include having a qualified archaeologist on site during any ground disturbing activity during the demolition in case there are some historic resources that are uncovered during the ground disturbing activity. Also, for the applicant to install permanent signs commemorating the history of H.B. Wagner and the Wagner family. Also repurposing the bricks from the existing building in the front facade of any buildings fronting First Street, and authorizing the Heritage Guild to document the building prior to demolition. So those are all noted in the conditions of approval in your packet. In addition, staff recommends one more condition, and that would be to record an irrevocable covenant in the deed to ensure that these conditions are implemented. So the conditions would run with the land. On April 3rd, the Historic Preservation Commission held a public hearing and unanimously recommended the City Council approve the certificate of appropriateness subject to these conditions, minus the irrevocable covenant, one that staff is recommending tonight. And in addition, council is required to make one more finding, and that is to find that there are special circumstances that exist and that approval of this demolition would result in a public benefit. And as noted in the staff report, there is an engineer's report, which was confirmed by the city's plan check engineer, that the building has some major building code deficiencies and is indeed unsafe to occupy or to be around. So to approve this demolition would be a benefit to the community by removing a potentially hazardous building. So in conclusion, staff recommends the City Council adopt a resolution certifying the mitigated negative declaration, approving Certificate of Appropriateness 16-007, subject to conditions, including a condition for the applicant to record an irrevocable covenant in the deed to implement the conditions of approval, and to instruct staff to change the National Register status code for the subject building from 3S to 6Z in the next update of the downtown specific plan. So that concludes staff's presentation, and we're available for any questions.
Questions for staff? Councilmember Carling?
I'm a little confused about the number of buildings that were on the site in 1988. So, because there were other buildings on the site in '88 that are associated with the Wagner Winery and the Red's Auto Shop, or whatever it was called, the concrete buildings that have since been torn down?
That's correct. So there were some accessory buildings that were part of the winery that burned down, in addition to the two commercial buildings that were demolished last year.
Right.
And going back even further, the original Wagner family residence was also on
Right,
site.
and it was moved, I
That was
understand.
relocated, correct. So there have been a number of changes to the site context.
So in '88, there might have been 5 buildings on that parcel? 4 or 5?
5, yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Any questions? Okay. With that, I'm going to open up the public hearing. About a half a dozen cards here. First, I'd like to hear from Kathleen Willey, Jason Bezos, Nancy Bankhead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My last name is Wiley.
Oh, sorry. I thought Wiley was one L. Sorry.
I am Kathleen Wiley. I live at 2878 4th Street, which is to say I live in Palisade Complex that is adjacent to the property we're discussing today. My husband and I own a townhome there, and I'm here to speak to the experience of living near this plot. It attracts trash, graffiti, loiterers. In its current state, it is the most direct route for my husband and I to walk downtown, which we do enjoy doing, both on 1st and 3rd Street. We go right by the property. And I'm uncomfortable walking by that property alone at night to and from downtown. So I look forward to the removal of the barn and the revitalization of the property. So thanks. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Ms. Wiley. Jason Bezos, Nancy Bankhead, Glenn McLean.
Good evening. I believe that this is basically many issues here. First of all, the CEQA procedural issues. There was a notice that I received in the mail that said that the documents would be at the public library. As I've said in one of my documents, they were not at the public library at all during this comment period. Also, the website where the document's supposed to be listed, both in the public notice in the East Bay Times on June 15th, the documents were not at that website either, and also in the notice I received here. And also, on page 27 of the ISMD-MND, it refers to a February 20th, 2014 report as being attached, but the attachment's not there, and that's a legal issue because the documents are supposed to be complete. In those documents that were excluded was the Historic American Building Survey condition, which was absent, which was in that section, and I would like to see that imposed as a condition, but again, that was missing. And as for definition of project, I think that CEQA requires the whole the action to be considered. It's clear this project includes redevelopment. I'd like to see integrating this in, seeing the feasibility of including into whatever real estate development is planned. And I noticed that the if feasible conditions, also we should be considering the redevelopment so we can actually figure if this feasible, because a lot of times things that are said to be feasible now are found to be not feasible later. Also, in 1959, there was a Carlisle Chemical. There was an industrial operation at the facility. I'd like to see that included in the initial study to be included. The 1988, what happened to those buildings? When did this fire happen? What date did the fire happen? What circumstances? I've never gotten answers. I asked the city clerk to see if we get a demolition permit. No record demolition permit. No record of HPC review at all. And as for the supposed public benefit, it's supposed to be a potential public safety danger is what you're claiming. I don't see substantial evidence in the record. Either is a public safety danger or it isn't. It's a bad precedent because you'll destroy other historic buildings in Livermore based on some claim it's potential. And this building is so unsafe to be around. Why is there such a short fence on it? Why isn't it boarded up? Why aren't there signs posted around it? I mean, I went there last week. I sent a picture there. You could walk over the fence. This basically is called demolition by neglect. The landowner wants this to be demolished and wants people to vandalize it to destroy its integrity. And also, Living Bethlehem was there a few years ago, and so it shows that there was use there. Now, as for Mr. Schauser's analysis, Mr. Lehigh was incorrect. The NRB 15 applies here. And there was not an analysis. She did not go in and do anything to look at essential physical features. She did not look at comparable properties like such other. She did not find vernacular winery. She did not look at the Concannon Winery, which is very similar, a brick squat building with a barn-like appearance. She just ignored all that analysis. It's incomplete and it's shoddy. And I also say, look at the Brisbane Railroad Roundhouse, where it had a fire in 2001, half burned down, but yet it's on the National Register because there's still integrity there. So again, one of my biggest problems is that I want Mr. Schauser to explain the essential physical features, why she didn't go through that full analysis in National Register Bulletin 15. And this is a National Register eligible. I don't want to hear excuses. They're downgrading the status. And it's in a National Historic Resource on the downtown specific plan. So I don't want to hear excuses that this is a CEQA analysis. We look at California standards. NRB 15 integrity analysis does apply, and she admits it also in her report, too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bezos. Nancy Bankhead, Glenn McLean, Beryl McLean.
Hi, I'm Nancy Bankhead. I just spent the last 9 days at the Alameda County Fair. I left the auction on Sunday and went to Reno to pick up a ram, and I got back at 5 o'clock today. I am in my native costume. I am a Livermore rancher. This property my family bought in the 50s. This was my toy as a child. These came from the property as far as I know. I had 5 brothers. We built forts and we had mud pies. The bricks mean a lot to me, and if somebody's stealing them, it upsets me. Anyway, that's my story. I'm a little bit upset and a little bit tired. It's been a busy week. This process has been going on for a year. I've had, it's gone before the Historical Society or Commission. It's gone before the council umpteen times. Many people have worked on this project, city staff, my spending money on it. It has just been an amazing process to get down a building that I got a letter from your code enforcement that it's getting graffiti on it. So I don't know what to do about that. All the issues have been explored thoroughly. The clear conclusion is to move forward with this project and move Livermore on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bankhead. Glenn McLean, Beryl McLean, Jeff Caskey. Mr. McLean.
Good evening, everybody. I'm sorry if I seem a little nervous. I don't talk in front of people much, but
That's okay.
My name's Glenn McLean. I'm the son of Robert McLean, grandson of Henrietta McLean, nephew of Nathan McLean, and great-grandson of Henry B. Wagner. Nathan McLean was one of the Gold Star boys and has a plaque on the sidewalk downtown Livermore with his name on it. Nathan gave the ultimate sacrifice for his country during World War II. You guys have honored Nathan with a plaque and lots of historical items, which is, our family is forever grateful for Livermore doing that. Henry B. Wagner married Mary Black. These two families were very early settlers in the Livermore Valley back in the 1800s with the Mexican land grants, establishing this community with many other early settlers in the Livermore area. Henry B. Wagner built and maintained the Wagner Winery. He was a very kind man. He adopted 2 children that Mary Black had from a previous marriage and made those 2 kids like his own, and they were fully entitled to inheritance like his own children. And then my great-uncle Gatzmer Wagner, he owned the property where the Livermore Airport is currently located and ended up selling that to Livermore. So our family is very rich with Livermore history. Henry's Winery shipped products all the way back east, including brandy, via railroad, which was basically unheard of in the day. And he was very influential, very forward-thinking in doing that. So this winery does have historical significance and was one of the mainstays of Livermore back in the 1800s and on up into the 1900s early. So the Wagner Winery, by all rights, needs to be protected and preserved as much as practical and possible. It'd be a shame to the Wagner and McLean families to just demolish the winery without a care or thought to the significant rich history the winery provided to early development of Livermore. I hope the Livermore City Council does the right thing with preserving and honoring the Wagner Winery. It's not about politics, it's about doing the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Beryl McLean and Jeff Caskey. Ms. McLean, you're safe here.
Good evening. And I'm the American pronunciation, Burl versus Beryl. You can blame my other grandfather. Good evening and greetings from Grass Valley, where I came from today, my current home. And thank you for time to speak this evening. My name is Beryl Allison McLean with a recently restored maiden name, no longer Beckwith. I am the only daughter of Robert and Jean McLean, both now deceased in 2002 and 2010, respectively. I am the only granddaughter of Henrietta and Ernest McLean. My grandmother, Henrietta Wagner McLean, was named after her father, Henry B. Wagner. I just realized that a few weeks ago. And thus I am Henry's great-granddaughter as well. For a bit of my background, I'm a contracts administrator and senior paralegal, a licensed California real estate broker, a degreed anthropologist from UC Davis, and for good measure, lived aboard a sloop for 18 years, logged 25,000 miles at sea, and hold a 50-ton Master Captain Coast Guard license. So there are a few proficiencies gained over my 62 years, and as it happens to all, time marches on and I am now the matriarch of the family. This makes me feel like my shelf date is approaching expiration, but I haven't quite been pulled yet. The family first became aware of the consideration of demolition of the last remaining winery complex building on September 25th of last year. Unfortunately, just 5 days before a major revision and reconstructive back surgery that kept me on short-term disability and off work for almost 5 months. Stephen Spadowski called me on September 25th, which was followed by an email the next day from Jeff Caskey. Jeff wrote to me, "Hey, Burl, I'm friends with Stephen Spadowski on the City Council, and he let me know you were concerned about the Wagner Winery demolition. He said he responded, but I wanted you to know we are paying attention as well. Besides being with the Heritage Guild, I sit on a city's 5-person Historic Preservation Commission, and the demo permit came to HPC for approval. HPC is all local residents, not city employees. We went out and toured the site, talked to architects, and considered the options. It is an empty 2-story unreinforced brick building with some of the bricks already gone, leaving human-sized holes in the walls. With a fingernail, I was able to remove the mortar. To preserve it, the owner would have to essentially build a building inside it and somehow fasten it all together and figure out the crumbled mortar. We agreed that while it was interesting as a ruin, it really didn't hold potential as a preservation target, so we agreed with the, quote, necessity, unquote, of the demolition as required by the downtown specific plan. We were not thrilled with that, but once you stand in the middle of the decaying building, the answer is pretty obvious. The building is indeed one of the classic old bits of Livermore wine industry, and we asked the landowner to use some of the bricks to build a monument with a plaque talking about the location, which they were happy to do. That's a far cry from preserving it, but it was hard to imagine the practicality of resurrecting a building like that. Note that it has essentially no windows, so any practical reuse with reasonable windows for retail or residential would be a complete change of the look anyway. About the best you could say would be that the restored building used some of the old bricks. Anyway, we fight to preserve all sorts of things, and in fact, our next meeting will be about preservation and adaptive reuse of an old mansion built by Livermore descendants. But this one, I think, would have been seen as overreach by a lot of people if we had required a private landowner to rebuild from the bottom up. Hope all is well, and thanks for continuing to care about our area. Thanks, Jeff." Unfortunately, and a bit surprisingly, since I know Jeff through the family's donation of a large amount of Wagner and McLean materials to the Livermore Heritage Guild, this communication misinterprets the family's focus, which is not an expectation that the last building have a seismic rebuild as a standalone building. We have never made that request or assertion. Thus, I arrived home post-surgery with a long list of catch-up to-dos on the matter at hand in order to submit comments prior to the 10/24/2016 City Council meeting. If I had been physically able, I would have been in attendance. The only reason I knew of the re-review on that agenda was through a direct email on October 24th from Frank Guido, Associate Planner, which stated it occurred to him over the prior weekend that I may or may not be aware of, quote, the latest, unquote. I was not. I have remained steadfast since in educating myself and also allowing the family time to try and come up to speed by reviewing public records so we all might do our respective due diligence in order to be adequately informed of the issues. We have endeavored to interact with respectful and civil exchanges, common sense inquiries, and good intelligence with care about a win-win outcome. The Wagner and family McLean families realize tonight's meeting is critical as to the agenda item at hand. The family still has deep concerns about the decision-making process to date. I have directly asked Scott Lee if there was a development plan application in process, and he indicated there is not. But yet there are continuous references to, quote, the project, unquote, on the public record, particularly by Ms. Bankhead in ad hoc comments. There are also concerns on the record by Councilman Bob Warner that the Historic Preservation Commission not conflate the physical condition of the subject building with whether the Wagner Winery is a historic resource. However, Ms. DeShazo did just that in all of the versions of the Evans and DeShaza reports. There was never a conclusion reached about historical significance of the winery. It appears there was a jump to the conclusion that the winery lacks integrity. And when I say that, I mean by legal definition of integrity. And there the analysis ends. In our review with objective professionals, this is a deeply flawed analysis. Changes in register eligibility codes we feel is unwarranted and simply clears the path for demolition. The following public record excerpt was particularly disconcerting. Quote, Nancy Bankhead, the owner of the Wagner Winery, stated she met with Stacy DeShaza, the consultant working on the historic evaluation of the Wagner Winery at the property. Ms. DeShaza is going to give Senior Planner Lee her report. Ms. DeShaza said the building is structurally unsound and there is nothing in the neighborhood that is preserved. It doesn't fit in with the modern stuff that is there now that's been allowed, to be built, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. Ms. DeShaza wasn't really interested in the history as much as she was with the surroundings and what the building was. The study is done, but she thinks it doesn't answer the question of what is significant because that's the word that kept coming up. For her, it's not significant as her family owned it for 63 years. The Wagners have no history in the building for the last 63 years, and the Bankheads have. On our way here, my brother Glenn and I just stopped to visit the family plots at Memorial Gardens on East Avenue. Henry B. Wagner and his wife, Mary M. Black. Our grandparents, Henrietta Wagner McLean and Ernest McLean. Anne and Marion Wagner, Gatzmer Wagner, Uncle Gatz, and wife Genevieve. Henrietta, Gatz, Anne, and Marion, all Henry and Mary's children, along with Henry's other grandson and our dad's only brother, Nathan Black, that my brother referred to, died at age 17 in the war at Guadalcanal in 42, Livermore's first Gold Star boy. And imagine how it might feel as a Wagner descendant to read this one item alone on the record by Ms. Bankhead, questioning the Wagner family history in the building. We can establish that the Wagner family did not neglect the property for the last 60-plus years. We can establish that the Wagner family built a thriving winery complex that provided significant...
Ms. McLean, I'll have to ask you to wind up, please.
I'm almost done. I'm sorry, I didn't know if there was a time frame. Let me see if I can fast forward here. We would submit that there is no disputing the multi-generational Wagner and McLean family histories in Livermore Valley, and that these histories stand by their own, outside of any short-sightedness, shortcuts, or lack of respect by the current owner in making a statement of that nature. I don't believe you will find anything on the public record in reverse. So we would respectfully ask the applicant, which is it, something to be cherished or a sore thumb? So our concerns are around what's already on the record, around the lack of demolition permits for the adjacent buildings that are now gone. Why has the city not been able to produce evidence of the removal of those structures done properly under permit? And why all of this wouldn't lead a layperson to conclude that it's just a desire for approval of demolition due to neglect. So in closing, and I'm sorry to have run longer, again, I didn't know the time frame. The family respectfully asks that the City Council not approve demolition of the last building of the 1890s Wagner Winery under a segregated process of demolition and redevelopment. It would seem prudent that the city demand the applicant put up a security fence to protect the public and the building until a redevelopment project is submitted and conditionally approved. I had a quote done on that would run $50 to $60 a lineal foot for a good security fence. So we're talking well under $10,000 to protect that. There seems to be excessive concern about the danger the building presents, but neither the city nor the applicant have taken action to secure it, nor has it been red tagged. So why the rush to demolish? So we ask that you carefully consider, assess, analyze, and act accordingly so that there will be a good and thoughtful process as to both ethical and lawful decision-making in this matter. We have no desire to hold up development of the parcel. Time and progress move us all along in life. However, we do expect respect for what our family and many others here established so long ago, that laws be followed, due diligence be thorough, and available options thoroughly explored before a significant piece of Livermore history is allowed to be destroyed. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. McLean. Last speaker is Jeff Caskey.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jeff Caskey, 585 South K Street. As you've heard and know, I am a commissioner on your Historic Preservation Commission, but as is generally the case when I'm not speaking from the dais, my statements tonight are my own and not intended to represent the judgment or position of the Historic Preservation Commission. The Wagner family and related Black and McLean families have had a multi-generational influence in Livermore and have participated in the life of this town in winemaking, ranching, and service. Tonight's action does not seek to minimize those contributions. Indeed, I hope and it's my intent that the stories of these families and their contributions are remembered here in Livermore for generations. In spite of claims to the contrary, I am not questioning the significance of the Wagner family in Livermore. I had some further comments. I'll give my thanks to Burl for reading my previous statement, and I still stand by that. So maybe if I run short, maybe that'll make up for her time. I mostly want to note that anyone interested in further researching the story of any one of the associated families may do so with or without the building, which in itself I think is a measure of the building's significance, not the family's significance. Doing and compiling that research, making it available, would be a productive step in preserving this family history for tomorrow. We never like to see old buildings demolished, but in this case it's hard to look at that building and decide that that's the significance, that the building represents an important significance in and of itself. Thanks to the kindness of Ms. McLean and her family, the Heritage Guild does have a fair amount of documentation on their family. We've already published a short notice in one of our earlier newsletters about that, and I certainly invite anyone interested in researching the family and learning more about their contribution to contact the Heritage Guild. I hope that the next thing we see on the site does allow us to remember the Wagner family. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caskey. That's all of the speaker cards that I have. I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the council. Comments from the council? Just a quick question, if I may. The part of the staff report is to recommend reclassifying the building from 3S to 6Z. If it's demolished, what difference does it make, or is that part of the historical record?
It's mainly for the record.
Okay, all right, thank you. Because if you're designating the building and it's not there, it's, yeah, see my question, yeah. Back to the council, questions, comments? Wow.
Anybody want to start?
Go for it.
Well, I'd like to first state that I still stand by my comments made on October 24th of 2016. I believe it was the second time that the council heard this issue. I could go back to my notes and state everything, but that's on the record, so I will be brief. This item has gone before the Historic Preservation Commission 4 times and now to the council 3 times. So I don't think that anybody can be accused of rushing anything at this point. I don't recall the last time that we have seen an issue like this go before HPC and council a combined 7 times. If there were a way to, if there were a practical and possible way to preserve the building, I think we would be all for it. But there is no practical and possible way. It is deteriorating. People are literally stealing the bricks. You could put a 6-foot high fence around it, which I believe at one point there was a relatively tall fence around the area. People will still get by that fence to go hang out, steal bricks, do whatever. So I do believe that the special circumstances exist to make the finding, and I do believe that staff, the applicant, and in taking into consideration some of the family's wishes, reading through the emails, I believe that the plan to honor the site, reusing the bricks, there was murals, what have you, I think that is adequate for the site. But the long and the short of it is, it's a hazardous building that's deteriorating, and the most that you could do is rebuild it brick by brick, which you don't have all the bricks anymore, and then it would not be seismically safe. I mean, it's a single or double brick wall, single in some places. It's just not a safe building. So Again, I stand by my comments on the 24th of October, and I can see making the findings and the special circumstances.
Councilmember Carling?
I agree largely with Vice Mayor. I would just add that one of a couple of criticisms that I've read about. One is that any demolition or having the archaeologist on site during the demolition is sort of pointless because there may not be soil disturbed during that period of time. So what's the point in doing that? But we can put that, we as a council or as a city can put that requirement on whatever the future project is. And I think that's something we would certainly consider. The other criticism is that this needs to be looked at as one project. Well, we don't, I mean, there's lots of examples that were given to us, precedents where projects can be segmented like this, if you want to call it that, where the demolition takes place as one project and whatever the future development is another project. And certainly, again, will come before the Planning Commission and this council to make a determination about whether or not we think it meets what the expectations are. And that includes trying to include a lot of the comments that we've heard today. Reuse of materials, making sure that the Wagner and the Black McLean families are adequately honored for their history in this community. And I don't think anybody has said that we weren't expecting to do that. I'm sure that we will. And so please keep in mind that whatever move forward, whatever Ms. Bankhead decides to do with that particular property in the future, the Planning Commission and this council will have some decisions to make at that time. And we will keep in mind the testimony we've heard tonight, as well as over the last several months. So again, I appreciate the concern. I appreciate the enthusiasm of folks. And the concern includes not just the concern of the Wagner family, but also the people that live nearby. Ms. Wiley's testimony is not the only testimony I've heard. I've gotten some emails about what it feels like walking by that property. So there are other considerations to be made here too. That there are people that live nearby that don't feel that it's safe to be around it. Not just because it might fall down, but because of the attraction, I guess, of others to that particular area. So I'm looking forward to making a decision tonight about what to do.
Councilmember Coomber?
Well, I'm known in my family as the amateur historian. I've gone all over the North State into every little burg and town and residence that once was, and saw how they've crumbled and left a legacy of maybe a stone foundation or a 4x4 that was hewn out of a rough log up in Plumas County and Lassen County. So I respect history. I understand why it needs to be preserved. And that's why it's so painful to come up with the conclusion that there are so many missing elements from trying to preserve such a structure. I enjoy driving past the winery. I too have had the experience of walking past it, finding people sleeping within it on a stormy day and getting up and moving around, and I wonder what would happen if we had another 4.7 shake like we did many years ago, and who answers for that? I look at a school a block away, and kids running home and going to their cars, and kids being kids and seeing what kids do, and climbing a fence that short, heck, I can do it in my wheelchair. So it troubles me that they may be in there playing, because I know I did the same kind of thing when I was a kid in places where I probably shouldn't have gone, and probably, or maybe would now. I don't know, but it's a wondrous building to see and behold. Its history is going to be well preserved. His legacy will be all over town. The Wagners, McLeans. Listening to the McLeans talk was just painful, because I understand what they're going through, and it's hard for me to look at it purely from a historical point of view it's also a public safety issue, and that's the part that I focused on most when I really had to come up with a decision to make. It's nothing to do with future development. The context of the neighborhood has changed. Over time, it's gotten more populated there than it was when I moved here 30 years ago. So I think the time now is to let's make that property safe and see what we can do with it going forward.
John? Yeah, I'd just like to say I agree with the comments made so far. And what I'd like to add to it, and it was noted by Ms. McLean, I'm the one, I think in the last time around, that was the deciding vote that said we ought to remand this back. And what I was concerned with at that point is we do have other historic buildings within the town, and just wanted to make sure that we followed a very thorough process. So I would say in this case, this has been thoroughly assessed, and as some pointed out, maybe too thoroughly. But you're also the one that maybe instigated this. But I think it's been thoroughly assessed, properly documented, and we've followed the a good process, which I think gives us some lessons learned from this for any future buildings. And so I say I agree with the staff recommendations and the recommended conditions for approval.
Okay. This has been very difficult because I spent many hours, many very enjoyable hours inside that building, not drinking the wine. It was when it was an antique shop. And it was just a really cool old building. I mean, you walked into the room on the left and the floor literally sagged as you walked down. So it was a fun place. It really was. And I certainly appreciate the McLeans making the long drive down here to provide the historic context and your comments as well. And they were certainly heartfelt because you've got a long history in this community. Got a lot of emails on this one. People were saying that I have no sense of history in Livermore, and how can the city demolish this building or propose it? The city is not proposing to demolish this building. The owner is. It's not the city. The owner is. And if you want to talk about the history of Livermore, it's a fifth-generation ranching family that has that building. So there's a long-standing, pardon me? Oh, okay. It's a long-standing ranching family. I mean, when I found out that your mother was Tilly Calhoun's fifth-grade teacher, it just, my head almost exploded. But there's a long-standing history on both sides here. And it was interesting, the point about there's no site context anymore. And based on that perception, there's no site context for the train depot. The tracks are gone, none of the buildings are around there. So you could make the same determination for the depot, and yet I don't think anybody here would even suggest that it wouldn't be a historic and significant building. I was the one that made the motion to hopefully repurpose this building. Because I had always thought it'd be great we've wanted to have a wine museum, and what better place than to use this building to be able to repurpose it. But on the other hand, as Mr. McLean suggested, it should be preserved as much as possible. And what I keep hearing is that it's not possible, that it could be taken down brick by brick and rebuilt brick by brick. And I don't think that anybody would hope for that. One of my concerns is that for future buildings, that this demolition by neglect concept, that if the building, if there are future buildings for consideration, the depot was almost demolished by neglect. It was 40 years that it sat there in private ownership, and nothing ever was done except gradually was neglected. So I want to be very careful, and I refer back to what Councilmember Warner said, that we go through a very rigorous process, and that we don't allow buildings to be demolished by neglect. This building, for 60 years, it's slowly deteriorated through no one's fault. But this is it's the fact. But we need to be very mindful, and I depend on the folks from the Historic Preservation Commission and the Heritage Guild to be watchful and mindful that when there are historical resources, that we do not lose them through neglect. So I begrudgingly, somewhat disheartened to have to agree that I believe that this building is too far gone, and I understand Mr. McLean's preserve it as much as possible, and I would again recommend to the owner that they, and I've heard some of the context and some of the things that are hoped for to ensure that the site is remembered, and the reuse of the brick on the site to have, maybe perhaps restore some of that historic context. And I look forward to seeing how the Wagner family can be memorialized in the community. But begrudgingly, I have to concur that I believe the site is too far gone to try to do something with it, despite my best hope and wishes. But I can't get everything. So with that, I look for a motion.
Sure, I'll make the motion to approve staff's recommendation, citing that we've found that special circumstances exist to make that motion. And also, I wanted to, well, I made the motion. I'll just make a comment after, if there is a second.
We would ask you to add the additional condition that the conditions run with the land.
What was that?
As Mr. Lee mentioned earlier, the condition that the conditions of approval be conditioned to run with the land.
Right. Okay, I thought that was in the staff recommendation. So the conditions of approval are recorded with the land. Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Coomber.
And then the additional comment was, and I did say a lot back in October, but one thing that did creep up again is that this building is its own worst enemy, just the way that it was constructed and the materials. So if you look to blame anybody for this, it's the building itself. I don't even know if it could have been preserved with the type of mortar that was used, but anyway.
Any further comment on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you for all of your comments. Thank you for your passion, and thank you for your sense of history. .03, this is the Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility hearing for TEFRA. It's Mr. Alessio.
Yes.
He left.
No, he isn't there. And we do have Peter Ross, Steve Malikian, and Dan Lopez, if you'd like to join us up front here. So I will give a short introduction to this item. Eden Housing is ready to move forward with the refinancing and rehabilitation of their 70-unit Stony Creek apartment project. And we are asking the council this evening to hold a public hearing as required by the Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act, or TEFRA for short, in order to issue the multifamily housing revenue bonds that will partially fund the project. We're also requesting approval of resolutions amending a former RDA loan and appropriating approximately $750,000 in City Affordable Housing Trust funds to fund a new loan on the property. And as mentioned, we have Peter Ross, Steve Malikian, and Dan Lopez here, our consultants. To answer any questions that the council might have, we're asking you to hold the required public hearing, take any comments, and then approve the project per the staff recommendation.
Okay, any questions for staff or for the consultants at this point?
Yeah, is there a presentation, or are we just asking questions?
That was the presentation.
Sorry.
I know
Okay.
you got a long agenda.
Okay, so I do have. So there's some mention that that 7 of the units will be held for the homeless, housing the homeless, and I wondered if any of those are being occupied now by formerly homeless, because I guess if they lived there, they wouldn't be homeless anymore. And if not, then how is it the next 7 that come empty? I mean, how does this work? I don't really understand that, other than that 7 were going to be held for housing the currently homeless.
Right. I believe the agreement that we have with Eden identifies that as units become available, we would...
Sure, but is it the next 7?
Yeah, I would say it is the next 7.
Okay, well, I was just asking. I mean, it could be the last 7, and we would, we would never house any homeless.
Right. It is fully occupied. So as the next 7 units, after this agreement goes into effect, become available, we would...
And I also didn't understand, there's some comment about transition age youth. So does that mean that you're only going to look at youth from foster homes, or what? I didn't get that discussion in the report.
So youth that are transitioning out of foster care are
Right.
at significant danger of becoming homeless.
Sure, but do they have a preference over people that are currently homeless?
I don't think so, no, but that is a...
Well, how do they fit? I didn't understand why was that even mentioned then?
It was just as a priority group to look at with Eden.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay.
Further questions? Okay, I think one of the coolest projects that was done not that long ago, was about 50 volunteers from the community came down to Stony Creek and built that playground that the children at the site designed. But that was just an amazing example of the community coming together to create something that's really, really a wonderful asset. And I think that this whole complex is a wonderful asset for this community, because it serves those that have a tremendous need, and echoing Councilmember Carling's concerns as well. Okay, so I'm going to open up the TEFRA hearing. I have no cards, so with that I'm going to close the TEFRA hearing. And moving on, any questions or comments at this point? Is there a motion?
I'll move to accept the staff report.
Moved by Councilmember Carling, seconded by Councilmember Warner. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passed unanimously. Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. That was quick, huh? Okay, 5.04A. This is the General Plan and Development Code Amendment to extend transferable development credits, the TDC program, and the HIP.
And I would just note for you this evening, we do have several. This is our second general plan amendment cycle of the year, so we are limited by the state to the number of general plan cycles we can have. We can have 4 per year for each element of the general plan, and so we are on our second cycle. We typically do spring, summer, fall, and winter, and so that's why you see the bundling of several of these items here this evening.
Good evening, Mayor Marchand and council members. The 2017 through 2019, well, first off, I'm Susan Frost, Special Projects Coordinator. The 2017 through 2019 Housing Implementation Program consists of 3 applications. The first is a general plan amendment regarding allocations for the Transferable Development Credits, or TDC program. The second is a development code amendment, which would implement the general plan amendment, and a policy proposal, which includes the 2017 Community Services and Infrastructure Report and the 2017 through 2019 Housing Implementation Program. Just some brief background. The city has had some form of residential growth management since 1976 and has been using the Housing Implementation Program, or HIP, since 1987. In particular, the land use element goal, LU-2, and related policies provide a policy direction for growth management. These policies identify infrastructure and services to consider when establishing a residential growth rate. And these include such things as schools, water, wastewater treatment, parks, and public safety. To that end, the 2017 Community Services and Infrastructure Report was prepared. And up on the list on the slide shows the services and infrastructure that were reviewed for their capacity to accommodate growth for the next 3 years. Overall, community services and infrastructure have capacity to accommodate growth, and there are no growth limiting factors for the next 3-year cycle. There may be localized areas where potential limitations may exist, such as storm drainage, but these issues can and will be addressed through either on-site design or development-funded improvements. The General Plan Amendment would amend the land use element policies to reserve housing allocations for projects utilizing transferable development credits. The current general plan policy guaranteed 2,000 allocations through the end of 2016 and sunsetted the use of those allocations at that time. For this GPA, in the next 3-year HIP, 400 allocations per year would be reserved for TDC projects, and any unused allocations would carry forward beyond 2019. The Development Code Amendment very simply implements the provisions of the General Plan Amendment into the Development Code. As indicated, the General Plan includes procedures and requirements for adopting the 3-year Housing Implementation Program. Based on the information in the Community Services and Infrastructure Report, the city would then determine the average annual residential growth range for a 3-year period. The Planning Commission reviewed the applications at its meeting of May 16th, and staff and the Planning Commission recommend 450 allocations per year for a total of 1,350. This is consistent with the last 4 HIP cycles, or for the last 12 years. 400 of those allocations would be reserved for TDC projects. 50 of the allocations per year would be reserved for HIP projects. Regarding the Downtown Specific Plan program, no new allocations are recommended. Current general plan policy allocated 2,000, reserved 2,000 allocations for the Downtown Specific Plan area, and to date only 434 of those allocations have been used, so sufficient allocations are remaining to accommodate anticipated development in the downtown for the next 3 years. In summary, the Planning Commission and staff recommend that the Council adopt a resolution approving General Plan Amendment 17-002 regarding the allocations for TDC projects, introduce an ordinance for Development Code Amendment 17-002, which would implement the General Plan Amendment, adopt a resolution approving the 2017 Community Services and Infrastructure Report and the 2017 through 2019 HIP program, which includes the 450 allocations per year, 400 of those reserved for TDC projects, and 50 of those allocations reserved for HIP projects. That concludes my presentation. We're available for questions.
Questions for staff? One question on the report was great. I thought that was a terrific report. When it was talking about water supply in the area near South Front Road in Vasco, it says that the pipes will have to be replaced to accommodate growth in those areas. Would that be required by the developer that moves into that area? Would there be a facilities district put in place? What would the mechanism for that be?
Our standard mechanism is the first developer in will provide those improvements. They'll be reimbursed for the portion that is beyond their pro rata share as new other development comes in through our impact fees. You can do an assessment district, but there you have to get the vote of everybody involved first, and there's some costs associated with forming it.
Yeah, okay, very good. Thank you. Do you have any cards? Okay, there's no cards. So one comment that I've got is in the from the Planning Commission. There were some comments regarding the school funding and some of the limitations that we had on that. And I just wanted to point out that that's a state issue, and we've been working with our representatives from the state to equalize the funding for the schools, because that's based on when the school unified, and we unified a long time ago, and so there's this imbalance in the funding. And also there was a question about jobs housing balance, and there was a reference that putting in a lot of bars and restaurants, and just wanted to point out that the city has been very active in bringing in high-paying manufacturing jobs and engineering jobs. We're bringing in Gillig, we're bringing in Draxelmeyer, and those are not bar and restaurant type jobs. Those are high-paying manufacturing jobs, and that this is why we're working with iGate to create new jobs in the area. So we maintain that one-to-one jobs housing balance. So we've got roughly the same number of housing units that we've got in the pipeline as we're adding jobs. So this is why we're in good shape here. Silicon Valley, they were adding one housing unit for every 19 jobs. So that's why we've got people that are commuting from Stockton to get to Silicon Valley, but we've got that one-to-one jobs housing balance here. So Livermore is doing it right. So with that,
I got a question.
Yeah.
Just real quick.
So that one.
Just real quick. I mean, I don't think it's pointed out here so much, but this is essential to give the people that are planning projects some kind of certainty, right? I mean, that's the essence of this. You want to elaborate a little bit? You don't really say it here, but in order for us to have some kind of rational process here, this is necessary.
Yes, absolutely. So we have a 3-year cycle for a reason, and as people look across the community and look to invest, there's a substantial time that it takes for somebody to look at a property, go through the entitlement process, and actually bring housing up out of the ground. You're looking at a 2 to 3 year process to get a unit entitled, built, and for sale. And so that's why we have this sort of time frame for this program, and that's why we do the infrastructure report, to make sure we can handle it over that time period as well.
So with that, I'll make the motion supporting this, unless somebody else.
There's a motion, and then we have a comment.
I'll second, so I can comment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, do you have, I thought I asked you for cards. Okay, so I have no cards. I'm going to open the public hearing. Seeing no cards, no comments, I'm going to close the public hearing. There we go. Thank you.
Do we need to remake motions?
Go ahead. Motion moved by Councilmember Warner, seconded by Vice Mayor Spadowski.
And here's my grand comment. So this level of housing per year maintains about a 1% growth rate for the city. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's about 1 to 1.5. 1 to 1.5.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we stated that, because some people will see 400 units a year and go, we're doubling in size every year. So it's about 1% to 1.5%.
What's funny, and back in the day, we were going by percent, and people were concerned because as you increase the population, that percentage becomes bigger. So that was when we got back, we flipped it, and now we have the housing units themselves.
So now we got both.
Now we have
Pardon
both.
me?
Now we have both percent and units.
I just want to make one quick comment that as we're looking down the road and down the line here, I hope we're including the fact that public safety also needs to be considered as we increase our population too. That's just an overriding theme with me, and I just,
Certainly. And that continues to be the number one priority in our budget. Okay, so I've got a motion, second by the Vice Mayor. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passed unanimously. Great, thank you. Lifestyles, Valley Care.
Well,
Okay.
I've got a quick question.
Yes.
For Jason. I'm a member. Do I have to recuse myself out of this thing?
Mr. City Attorney.
Are you receiving any special benefits above and beyond any other member?
No, I don't think so. I mean,
look at him.
Well, if you're not, you can participate.
Okay, good, thanks.
Okay, so this is the Lifestyle RX Valley Care Building repurpose. Scott Lee and Steve Stewart.
Yes, hello again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This application involves the repurpose of the Livermore Lifestyle RX building. And just to give you some orientation, this is a drawing that shows the Stanford Healthcare Valley Care Medical Campus, Stanley Boulevard's to your right, and this is the Lifestyle RX building. The area of proposed changes are highlighted in yellow. So the main changes are converting an existing gymnasium into a two-story medical office wing of the building, and then to add a second story for some additional wellness facilities for the Lifestyle RX building. And in addition, to provide additional parking for the 18,000 square foot addition, there's some parking added to the west and east side of the campus, and this area would involve demolishing a single-story structure that's currently owned by Valley Care. So this shows a rendering of the building looking from the south, which is the back of the building. So Stanley Boulevard is up front, and from the exterior, there really isn't an increase in the building envelope. This is a gymnasium, so all they're doing is converting the double height space into 2 stories. And then this red outline shows the second story addition over what's currently kind of a rooftop patio. And some additional drawings. There will be some changes to the exterior of the gymnasium. Some punch-out windows will be added to continue the look of the existing building. So it meets all our design standards and guidelines. It's well blended in with the existing building. And then you see the addition. Again, you see the rhythm of the windows, the height of the building, and the color materials matching the existing building. So it'll look like part of the original. And here is the single-story house which was converted into an office after Valley Care purchased the building. It was built in 1950, so it has to receive a certificate of appropriateness for the proposed demolition, and it went to the Historic Preservation Commission, and they unanimously recommended approval of the demolition. And this application, although it's fairly modest, it's a 18,000 square foot increase in floor area, requires a general plan amendment and a plan development amendment. And I'll just briefly explain why. The general plan designates the medical campus as office commercial, and that designation has a maximum floor area ratio of 0.3, which means can only cover 30% of the parcel area with building floor area. And that basically limits development to a one-story building for an office commercial site, which is appropriate if it's located near single-family residential, which a few of our office commercial designated land is. For example, there's some along East Avenue and North L Street. But in this context, where it's mainly surrounded by a large commercial development and other office, it may be appropriate to increase the FAR to 0.6, which would allow two-story buildings. And so that is what staff is recommending, that the general plan be amended to include a large office commercial designation where it's appropriate to have two-story office buildings. And this would be an additional tool for the Planning Commission and the City Council to use for areas where it may be appropriate to have two-story office buildings. So that's a proposed amendment that would allow this addition. And secondly, the plan development amendment limits the FAR to around 0.4 for the parcel, and staff is recommending that the FAR in the plan development zoning for this area be increased to 0.6 to be consistent with the proposed general plan amendments. And secondly, that the office use that is being converted into a parking lot, which currently is zoned for commercial office, be designated as part of the planned development for the Valley Care Medical Campus. So in summary, staff is recommending, Planning Commission and staff is recommending the council certify the environmental documents, approve the general plan amendment, approve the site plan design review modification subject to some minor conditions of approval, and approve the certificate of appropriateness for the demolition of the single-story building. And finally, Planning Commission and staff is recommending the City Council adopt an ordinance approving the plan development amendments. So that concludes staff's presentation, and we're available for any questions.
Questions for staff? Okay. One of the things that some of the concerns that we heard from the community were noise from late night and early morning deliveries, and also transients using the. There was, I guess, there was an opening in the sound wall. How are those going to be addressed?
Yes, so there was a public comment during the Planning Commission meeting where those issues were brought up, and with regard to the noise, it was mainly an operational issue. They have trucks delivering in the middle of the night, and I know the applicant, who also is the property owner, has been working with Valley Care to address that concern, and perhaps he can shed some information on the progress he's made. And the same goes for the loitering. There's a small kind of walkway that leads from the neighborhood on Glenwood Court to the Valley Care campus, and I believe the applicant has also been working on that issue as well.
Okay. If there's no other questions, I'm going to open the public hearing. Unless we have a
quick question.
Oh,
here.
yes.
I'm pretty familiar with the neighborhood down there. I was a lifestyle member for years. But doesn't that noise already exist? Is this new noise that we're talking about? Because I know there's still medical buildings and trucks coming and going all day and all night, for various reasons. So are we talking about additional noise from somewhere?
My question was about existing noise and how that would be abated if the building was changed. No, the same noise. Just see, but if we're going to do something else, this would be a good time to abate the problem.
Right, that's correct. The noise complaint has nothing to do with the proposed addition. It's just something that's currently being experienced by one of the neighbors.
Okay, with that, I'm going to, for the questions, I'm going to open the public hearing.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Joe Callahan with Liver & Mower Lifestyle Associates. Scott Gregerson, CEO of Stanford Healthcare Valley Care, is also here. I want to say that we're completely in tune with the staff report, and Scott's done a tremendously coherent and straightforward job of presenting the project. As to the truck noise, there were some changes to some of the delivery cycles and delivery locations that occurred over the last few years. And one of the neighbors, John Stella, was kind enough to raise those issues. And Scott's staff and my associates have been working with the various elements of Valley Care to get the trucking back into the pattern that it used to follow. We've discovered through closely looking at it that most of the deliveries are done by jobbers, and it's taken us a little while longer to get a grip on changing all of their cycles so that they conform with past practice. The issue that was raised is there's a long drive aisle on the east side of the hospital building itself, which previously wasn't used for nighttime deliveries, that several of the jobbers had started to use, and that we're working with the delivery organizations to get them back on the west side of the one-story element of the hospital where you see the trucking element. So they come in off of Stanley on the west driveway down the west side and actually do their deliveries on the west side of the one-story rather than on the east side. The other delivery issue had to do with a change in the use of the chemicals serving the pools and spas for Lifestyle RX. And those deliveries previously were in the early evening, and they changed supplier, and that supplier started delivering them at 4 in the morning. So we've been back after that, and I think we've got it, virtually under control at this point. As to the homeless problem, there have been issues in the S Street Park, City Park, that you're probably aware of. And from time to time, there have been some issues in the landscaped area behind this small office building at 197 Southwest that's being torn down. They're also at the foot of Greenwood Drive. There's an area between the medical campus screen wall and the foot of the street where there's a chain link fence section that isn't on the Valley Care property. That was there when we did the original redevelopment of the project, and there have been some homeless people camping out in there. So Scott and I have talked about, I can't tell from looking at the maps or talking with the title company who owns that. It looks like it's part of the street right-of-way, in which case we'll work out with staff tearing that chain link fence out of there so that there's no hiding spot. I think that's when we tear down 197, convert it into parking for the project, the whole area that they've been hiding out in the back of that property goes away. So I think to the extent that we can address it, it'll be addressed by that.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just want to make sure that those were brought up. It sounds like you're all over that. So
hopefully. Appreciate
it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just not a question, a comment.
Okay. If I have no other cards, any other comments? Okay, very good. Well, I'll close the public hearing then. Thank you, Mr. Callahan.
I'm just saying I'm glad to see that the new owners are investing in this area and that it's and being responsive. So I'm happy to see this occur.
Vice Mayor.
Great. Yeah. Dittoing that remark. I'm glad to see the work that Livermore Lifestyle Associates, and I'm still getting used to calling it Stanford Healthcare / Valley Care. It's always been Valley Care to me, but you've done a great job addressing some of the concerns. I also want to thank the Planning Commission. Always thankful for Planning Commission's comments and reviewing a lot of this essentially for us so we can read through the minutes and you get a lot of those questions answered so we can take on the, I guess, item. This item is collectively 654 pages tonight out of a council packet that's over 1,500 pages. So we really do appreciate the work that you put in ahead of time so we can read that over the weekend as I sit in front of my fire with my slippers and smoking jacket on or something. But in the summer, yeah, well, it's Livermore heat. You got to deal with it. So thank you very much for all the work.
Looking at further comments?
Yeah, I'll echo the previous comments. I think it looks like a terrific project, and I'm glad to see that actually going to expand some of the medical care there and provide for more outpatient surgery and consequently bring in more professionals into the city. And I think they've done a nice job, too, about considering the landscaping. I know there's a fair amount in there about the trees. And what they can save and what they won't, and planting some trees that are more conducive to our particular environment here in Livermore. So I think it's a well thought out, well planned project, and I look forward to it moving forward.
Councilor Cooper?
And just we were all echoing each other here, but I love the project. I have a number of doctors in the medical buildings down there, as well as I've been a member of Lifestyle for a long time. But I most appreciate the parking expansion. I think that's, for years, has been a matter of, you get down there before they open their doors up and find a place for the next few hours. But it can get pretty trying at times in midday, especially if you're trying to unload a wheelchair out of the back of the car. So it's... I appreciate it. I like the thoroughness of the evaluations that you did, and all the information given us just goes a long way to making an easy decision.
And again, the fact that it's expanding the medical facilities, that's something we've heard from our residents over and over again. So certainly appreciate the additional investment and commitment to the city of Livermore. So thank you. Okay, with that, I would close the public hearing, and I'll request a motion. Moved by Councilmember Werner.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Carling. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, it's 5 minutes before 9. Did you want to take a quick break? Okay, let's take about a 10-minute break here. Good evening and welcome back to part 2 of the July 10th Livermore City Council meeting. We're now up to item 504C1 and C2. It's a hearing to consider the general plan amendment for approximately 24 acres located southeast of 1st Street and Portola Avenue, and a zoning change from commercial service to the Transect 4 neighborhood residential zoning. So with that, we have Steve Stewart and Frank Guido.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Thank you, Mayor and council members, with the mic on. The project includes a general plan amendment by the city to establish the First Street Corridor transitional area. This will create a dual land use designation to permit continued commercial service use or conversion to residential. Additionally, with it, we have an application for 100 townhomes. The townhouse project is designed to comply with the proposed general plan amendment policies. It's also designed to comply with proposed development code amendments that are part of the application. In this presentation, we'll review the overall project, both items. So for overview and background, this map shows the area dotted in black, an approximately 24-acre area studied in 2016 when the City Council reviewed the First Street Corridor land use study. The red bounded area is the area the City Council in 2016 recommended to come back for a general plan amendment to allow for conversion to residential use. That's a 24-acre area, the red bounded area. The yellow highlighted area is inside the general plan amendment area, and that's the housing development site. It's nearly 7 acres. As for the general plan amendment site, and this map up is north, and the general plan amendment area is shaded. It's west of Portola Avenue, where it hits here, and First Street is along the north, the Union Pacific Railroad is along the south, and at each end you can see in circles that the thriving commercial service clusters are not part of the general plan amendment. They're left out to avoid any development pressure on those sites. In the general plan amendment change map, the general plan would create a dual land use designation, keeping the existing service commercial and adding the option to convert to the urban high residential UH2 designation of 8 to 14 dwellings per acre. This range is lower than the 14 to 18 dwellings per acre that was contemplated by the land use study. The general plan amendment will also establish a new transitional area that will stipulate a small set of policies tailored to this particular transitional area's context and scale. Transitional areas are an existing land use tool in the general plan. It recognizes unique scale and scope. The requirements will be to follow the circulation plan concepts that are illustrated and to have the dual land use designation to allow the conversion to residential and to encourage using the transit zone standards. In the circulation plan, all the red dotted lines are the required pedestrian circulation paths. At the bottom edge also is a street that would connect east to west and connect all the sites along the south, along the Iron Horse Trail, and that would be one of the primary vehicle circulation paths. Also, there would be 2 connectors to First Street with signals. Those are shown with the asterisks. As part of the application is a development code amendment to the T4N zoning district and to the townhouse standards. This slide shows the amendment to the T4N district that would be geographically limited with a map to this area only, and it shows the height standard amendment, and it would retain a 2.5-story height limit in the front 75 feet and allow a 3-story height limit in the back behind the front 75 feet. The bulk of the other amendments are clarifications, for example, for the townhouses to allow common open space to count, to meet the open space requirements, not just private open space, and to allow porches to front onto paseos, which is a common way of organizing that kind of development. The zoning map amendment would change for the housing development site the zoning from commercial service to the T4N zoning district, as shown here. This slide shows the proposed development in the yellow area, in the general plan area, as shown in the map. The circulation includes landscaped Iron Horse Trail elements along the south, the cross street along the south that can extend east and west if and when those properties to the east and west develop, one First Street access with a signal and crosswalk, north-south connections to and from First Street via Loop Street, and paseos in the north third of the site that connect with the park and also can extend east and west if and when those sites to the east and west develop. 100 units are divided into 20 buildings, ranging from 4 per building to 7 per building, and the First Street presence are fourplexes to minimize the massing on First Street. This project proposes 2-story buildings on First Street. These buildings include the farmhouse and craftsman styles, and each includes an 8-foot front porch. It's a minimum of 10 feet wide to comply with the T4N frontage standards. This slide shows the project's required 15 affordable housing units are well distributed throughout the site. At the April 18th Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission asked for clarification on how the project could better connect to downtown. Staff subsequently developed a concept for enhancing connections to downtown. This will include bicycle and pedestrian improvements along First Street, along the transitional area frontage, and over the First Street Bridge into downtown to Inman Street. That's on this map. So the improvements would be along the change area from the frontage of the First Street transitional area over the bridge and into downtown to Inman Street. This slide shows the proposed streetscape improvement concepts that the applicant will construct in their frontage. In addition, the applicant has agreed to make a contribution to the city towards phasing in the improvements along the rest of the transitional area frontage into downtown to Inman Street. And these improvements are not yet part of the CIP, but will be considered as part of the CIP in the next upcoming considerations. This contribution is secured with a development agreement which the applicants have executed and will be adopted by the ordinance in the packet. The council has a supplemental memo, and the attachments are showing the mitigation measures that are already contained in the project's environmental documents and conditions shown in the table format. The table format further identifies the method, timing, and party responsible for verifying compliance. The CEQA resolution is also amended to refer to and adopt this document by reference. So overall, this project forms a logical transition from the established neighborhoods across First Street right away to the north and from the commercial developments to the east and west. And the Planning Commission and staff recommend taking the actions as listed on this slide. That closes the presentation from staff, and the applicant's here for questions and with a presentation if the council would like to see it.
Questions from the council? The additional presentation? Any desire for that? Okay. One question I have on the slide showing the entrance to the building and the common space. It's about, I guess the common space is about a 1/4 acre. Yeah, back up. Yeah, that one. So that's the common space. So what is that kind of landscaping that they're proposing for this? Is it going to be like a tot lot, or what sort of amenity is going to be there? Because this is really the open space for the entire 100-unit development. And one of the concerns that I've got is first off, kids need some space. But on the other hand, what concerns me is if somebody's going down First Street at 40 miles an hour and they then turn in here, first thing they could do is run into that park. So I'm just concerned that there's sufficient security, bollards, whatever, to protect who's ever playing in that open space.
Okay.
So just to revision, reevaluate what's going to go there, recognize that it needs to be some open space, and that's where the playground or whatever. But you need to make sure that somebody doesn't drive into that. I think Bob's read just isn't trying to get here, Mr. Van.
Well, when somebody makes the turn into this development, they really won't be able to be going 40 miles an hour to start with.
So they'll be starting as they'll be going from 40 into the development.
Yeah, they'll need to slow down before they make the turn. Otherwise, they'll be hitting the curbs on either side before they even get there. But there will be standard curb and gutter along the side of the road, and I believe there's a piece of art kind of right in the focal point of the drive-in. I'm not aware of any special bollards or any other devices, but typically the standard curb and gutter would deflect a car that's going relatively slow.
Okay, but it's going to be there's a piece of public art there. So it's going to be more of just a passive open space than like a play space.
Okay, so just to clarify, it is going to be a play space. There is some play equipment proposed and an area of footing for children to play and some turf and the trellis. And so there is no specific, safety such feature anticipating someone going very fast. But if the council would like, it would be logical to include, say, a requirement for a low seat wall there, just to say where the art is, to buffer that.
Yeah.
But it is an active space. It's intended to be an active space.
Okay, an active space. Okay, but not really like playing with like not like playing kickball or something like that with the ball run out into the street. But there would be but there are play structures. But it sounds like you've got some sort of safety standards in place to make sure that anybody out there is safe.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Can I just, because just listening to that exchange, I didn't get the impression that it had been necessarily thought through sufficiently for the safety. I mean, you're saying, well, nobody is supposed to be going too fast. Nobody is supposed to be drunk. Nobody is supposed to be a lot of stuff. And if that were the world, then we wouldn't have any worries. But I think you're bringing up a good point, and so it's not clear to me that we've actually protected that area sufficiently.
Maybe a couple of bollards in there.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I mean, look at the number of, we've got these people who hit the gas pedal when they think they're hitting the brake and all that kind of stuff going on. So I think we ought to think about it a little better, especially since, as you point out, we're coming off of that road and you're making a transition. So I would like to see that explored a little better, as you suggest.
So not sure where that would go in this in the process.
If the council wanted to add a condition, we could certainly work with the applicant to provide an appropriate feature to provide a barrier.
Okay. All right, very good. Councilmember Coomer?
If I'm going to go completely to the other end of the project, and the Iron Horse Trail keeps coming up, and there's a section of it that appears to parallel the railroad tracks, if I'm correct. Is that going to be just within the confines of the development, or is it going to extend all the way down to the aid station where it currently gives up? And if so, in fact, either way, how simple will, I think of it as a public safety issue sometimes. If there are sections of the Iron Horse, believe it or not, that have people living on or near it. And I don't want to make a place that's very attractive next to a railroad far from a street. I'm a big fan of the Iron Horse Trail, don't get me wrong there, but I just want to make sure it doesn't detract from the overall elements that we're trying to improve here.
So the Bicycle and Trails Master Plan calls for the Iron Horse Trail to go all the way through Livermore. This project would only be constructing the piece along their southern boundary within their property line. won't be connected either to the properties on the east or the west for some time until the city can develop a project to
Gotcha.
extend it, or until the properties to the east and west
Will you
come
be
in
able
for
to walk
development.
from the units? Will there be gates to the trail section there, do you think, or an opening somehow? 'Cause I think of landscaping down there being a real perfect barrier for anybody who wants to stay there.
There'll be temporary walls until the trail's connected.
Gotcha.
So for the time being, it will be internal only to this project.
And as you see on the site plan, the street, essentially the vehicle circulation is immediately adjacent to the trail there. So it's not hidden behind units or otherwise separate.
Okay, any further questions?
Do we have any speaker cards?
I'm going to open up the public hearing. No cards, no comments. Okay, with that, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the council.
Am I it?
Yep.
Okay. So just general comments and questions. Again, want to thank the Planning Commission. I think the minutes for this one were, I think, 10 or 11 pages. So they really did ask a lot of great questions and answer questions as well. I like the enhanced connections to downtown aspect of this project. I hope we have a comprehensive plan for the rest of this site because in general, I wanted to mention that I wanted to thank the applicant for sticking with this project for so darn long. I believe it was proposed when I was on the Planning Commission. And really, you look at that, and they had to go through proposing the entire corridor and addressing the issues of the business owners and people being afraid that they would be moved out. And I think we've addressed that very well by drawing the dimensions of the developable land in that diagram. But overall, this isn't Route 84 anymore. This isn't Highway 84 going through here. So you're not going to get another auto dealership or any other kind of major retail going into this area. And I think one of the benefits of a development like this will be the calming effect on First Street. If you look, I don't know if we have the diagram up of the bulb outs. But in my experience, when you have the bulb outs and the center medians installed, that will have a traffic calming effect in that area. That should slow down traffic when they see cars parked on the side. Once you go up and over the railroad tracks, you do see everybody start slowing down because you're coming across those landscape features. And it doesn't show it here, but pulling it up in the packet, I was actually pulling up the stormwater control plan, hoping you had like a bioswale in front of that park, and then we could say, hey, argument over, there's a bioswale. Somebody, pedal confusion, they're going to hit the swale, and that's it. But I don't see it there. But I think that the chances of somebody actually coming in fast on that park are greatly minimized when if you're coming from First Street and have to cross over. So if you're traveling in the westbound direction, you have to actually kind of queue. I don't even think you can make that turn from the westbound direction. Is that? No, you can right there. You have to queue up for that left-hand turn. So if somebody is, they can't travel at high speeds going around that corner. And if they're alerted enough to realize that they have to make that turn in that pocket, I don't think they're suddenly going to pedal accelerate into the middle there. And if you're coming from the eastbound direction, if you notice just after those three cars from the eastbound direction, there's that kind of large bulb out. So it's not a sharp turn into the development. It's kind of more of a meandering, larger turn. So I think that's one of the great aspects of this project is starting to develop that streetscape, slowing the traffic down, having more features along that side, and not just kind of, how should I put it, seldomly used or sporadically used former auto sales. It seems they kind of rotate every now and then. I still, every time I drive by both of the motels, I've never, ever seen anybody swim in those pools. It's kind of a joke with my wife and my daughter. Every time I drive by, is anybody in there? No. Anybody in there? No. We're tempted to rent a room just so we can swim in the pool and say, yes, we saw somebody swim in the pool. I wonder what's going on. But it's just kind of an abandoned area, and I think this is going to be kind of a catalyst project for the whole area. I think it will not only benefit the community in terms of the traffic calming, but also providing a chance for some people to have home ownership. You see some people do criticize the densities or the style, but that's what some young families can barely afford nowadays. So it's just a choice of housing product that many people find attractive. I know I'm getting kind of tired of mowing lawns and doing all the yard work, so I'm starting to think that that's a nice option as well. But overall, great job. Thank you, staff. Thank you, applicant. Thank you, Planning Commission. I think it's going to be a large benefit to the community.
So with that, you're going to make a motion?
I don't know if we have any other comments. Or if we had questions, then I don't know.
Yeah,
if
we
there's
went to
any comments.
questions. I don't know if we went to comments
Okay.
yet, but if we're going to comments.
Comments?
We got comments. Driving by the old car dealers for how long? God, it's been a while since I've seen anything for sale or any activity around them at all. I think this is a real good project for this site. For me, for one who likes to spend time out of the car and walking along there, if that traffic is indeed calmed, a perfect situation because you're only another couple blocks from downtown. It's not a big deal to walk downtown. Leave the car at home. Don't make an effort. And the closer we can get clusters of people in a place that is so close to downtown where we can stay out of our cars and amble down the Iron Horse down towards the A Station or however. When we connect all these things together, we have the opportunity to use bikes now with the improvements to the street side. It's not a perfect project in my mind. I believe it may be on the edge of being a little too dense for my liking, but that's my liking. It's a real nice project and certainly an incredible improvement over what's there right now.
Councilor McCarlin?
I'd echo some of the other comments I heard. I do appreciate the applicant paying attention to not only what the Planning Commission and the staff have recommended, but also I think some of the comments that we've been hearing over the last several months, years about some of the architecture and some of the newer developments. And I appreciate not everybody has the same taste for architecture as others. But I think they have done a nice job in terms of integrating 3 different styles into it. I also appreciate that they've have a number of affordable and low-income housing options for folks, and they're mixed in amongst all of the homes that'll be available, so that you wouldn't be able to identify which ones those are. So I also appreciate what they've done with the street. I think it's changed this view of on the slide up there now. That thing has changed over the course of the discussions between the applicant, the staff, and the Planning Commission over the last several months. So I appreciate their willingness to consider some of the needs and interests of the citizens and the residents of this community. It's a good project.
And a longstanding collaborative effort, as you pointed out. So with that, I'd entertain a motion. So moved by Councilmember Warner.
I'll second.
Seconded by Vice Mayor Spadowski. Any discussion on the motion?
Only that it covers all the elements of each one. Are we going to separate motions on this, or is it all?
The maker of the motion, is that one
Comprehensive.
Motion? Okay.
Okay.
Can we do that, Mr. City Attorney?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Okay, so one motion, moved, seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, rolling up, that's it for the public hearings. Moving into matters for consideration. Item 6.01, this is agreements and related approvals for the El Charro specific plan. Mr. Alessio. Finally done.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. The item before you tonight is approval of Community Facilities District 2000 2009-1 Improvement Area Number 3 loan with Livermore Investments LLC relating to the financing of the El Charro specific plan infrastructure improvements. In 2009, the El Charro Community Facilities District 2009-1 was formed to finance roughly $40 million in infrastructure to support the development in the area that we talk about as being the outlet malls. At the time, during the Great Recession, there was a credit crunch, which made it particularly difficult to provide financing to get the project off the ground. So the project had to rely on the city's general fund credit in the form of the 2011 certificates of participation in order to receive financing to get the project moving. Each improvement area has a development agreement which requires repayment or substitution of the city certificate of participation when the development proceeds. In December 2015, the developer started the process. The loan was approved at that time with resolution number 2015-179, but the project stalled and the ownership changed, and now the project's ready to move forward again. So the loan is in front of you to approve again. It's roughly $3 million. It will replace our COP. The loan to move forward and approve this item requires a 4/5 vote. That is because the 2015-16 assessed value of improvement area number 3 is less than 3 times the principal amount of the loan. In order to comply with CFD regulations and adopted city policies, the council must find by a vote of not less than 4/5 that the issuance of the note to lenders should proceed. It's important to remember that this is not a debt with city commitment and that the loan will be secured and payable solely from special taxes levied on improvement area number 3. That's all I have.
All right. Questions? Okay. I have no speaker cards. Okay. So with that, I entertain a motion.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Moved by Vice Mayor Spadowski, seconded by Councilmember Carling. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, 6.02, the Downtown Steering Committee update. Mr. Stewart.
Thanks, Mayor Marchand. So we're back this evening in response to your direction at the June 26th City Council meeting.
Change your name tag so they can see you on camera. There we go.
I've always wanted to be like Doug, but tonight I'll just be Steve.
Don't want to confuse the folks at home. That guy's just like Steve Stewart.
Okay, so we are back this evening in response to your direction at the June 26th meeting to return with a status of the Downtown Steering Committee's work program, and also for direction regarding the format and timing for the meeting where the council receives the final report from the steering committee. So you recall that the council formed the steering committee to develop a public outreach program for issues related to development of the downtown, with an initial focus on obtaining feedback for the development of a downtown hotel. The committee has held 8 meetings so far. The work during the first 5 meetings was primarily focused on receiving background information necessary for evaluating opportunities and constraints, and for developing alternatives from which to develop public outreach. In addition to establishing the foundation for developing outreach, that background information was used by the committee to develop alternatives, and that's what they've spent doing at their last 3 meetings. The intended use of those alternatives is to facilitate public dialogue and highlight a range of possibilities for the sites. The city's consultant Placeworks took those alternatives that the committee developed, identified common themes, and then refined those 7 alternatives into 4 alternatives total, 2 showing a hotel on the east side of West Livermore and 2 showing a hotel on the west side of Livermore Avenue. And again, the idea behind those alternatives is to facilitate public dialogue and illustrate a broad variety of opportunities for the sites. At the last committee meeting on June 29th, the committee agreed to accept and forward to the City Council the outreach plan, the background information, and the alternatives developed by the committee, subject to minor clarifications and revisions. Some of the committee members have indicated that an additional steering committee meeting would be helpful to allow the committee to review the final work product and provide comments before returning to the City Council. However, staff has polled the committee members for additional meeting dates, and we're unable to get dates where a quorum of that committee would be available. The current schedule includes City Council review of the report at a special meeting on July 31st. However, some of the council members are not available on that date. So staff has polled the City Council, and August 7th looks like the date when all council members are available to meet. So at your June 26th meeting, you also discussed whether it might be advantageous to include the steering committee members in the meeting where the council receives the final report. That would allow the committee members to provide their insights and allow the council to ask questions and hear a variety of perspectives on the process and the outcome. So staff is recommending that the council provide direction on the timing and meeting format for receiving the Downtown Steering Committee's final report. And if you do determine that the steering committee should be present at that meeting where the council receives the report, then staff would return with modified rules of procedure and duties and responsibilities at a subsequent City Council meeting. That concludes our report, and we're happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions? You know it all, right?
Just want to be clear on the, because I see there are a lot of comment cards, and just want to make sure that the comments are relevant to what we're talking about tonight. So there is no chance of another steering committee meeting, is that correct?
There's no chance for another steering committee in adequate time to prepare the written report for the council's meeting, the council's final meeting.
Okay. So the other 2 remaining questions are, that you're asking us to do is reschedule the meeting to the 7th.
Correct.
And the other question is whether or not to make that a joint steering committee meeting and council meeting.
Correct.
So those are really the only 2 things that we're talking about, so that the public comment would be with respect to those 2 items. Is that right?
That's correct. Those are the 2 items we're seeking your direction on. To confirm August 7th as the date to receive the final report and the format of that meeting.
Okay, so just those 2 items. Thanks.
Any further questions at this point? Okay, I'm going to open up the public hearing. Okay, so we have asked that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. We have Alan Burnham, David Rounds, Gene King. Mr. Burnham.
Yeah, Alan Burnham. Thank you. First, I'd like to thank you all for what you have done to help continue to make Livermore a better city. So, this planning process, I think, has been a good one to try to get community buy-in in the development. One of the things that I would like to make a comment about the process is I was out of town for 3.5 out of 5 weeks, and I found the amount of information that's available online is not really quite adequate. So, I don't think that the plans that are going forth are actually available online, to my knowledge. And I would hope that in the future that we can actually get more data, like square footage and all that sort of stuff, actually online, so people who actually have a personal life, I think, Bob, you mentioned that at one of the meetings, we can't always attend the meetings. And so given the Bob Warner's instructions, I think I'll leave my comments there. They're most pertinent to the issues at hand here.
Thank you. David Rounds, Gene King, Tom Souls. Mr. Rounds.
Good evening. So I disagree that there were only 2 items on this agenda item. The agenda had 3, and I would like to speak to the first one. Should the council allow the Downtown Steering Committee to have an additional meeting? Yes. PlaceWorks and David Early have done yeoman's work moving the Downtown Steering Committee agenda forward, but the subject is big and so is the committee. And it's clear that many on the committee and the public feel that the process has been rushed to meet an artificial deadline and that the work product is incomplete. It appears that there is not consensus on the committee around the possible development plans, and realistically that probably won't ever happen. But the last meeting devolved into some strong conflicts between committee members on the detail of what is to be presented to the city council, and subsequently to the public. Before any presentation to the council, the committee members should be allowed to review and agree on the final adjustments to the communication and development plans that were made in response to are being made in response to the contentious feedback from last week's meeting. Even with an additional meeting, I'm also concerned that the product being prepared for the public will be incomplete. More focus is needed around the housing element and why housing has to be an integral part of any plan for this downtown site. Development is not free. And to get the hotel we want, and the park we want, and the conference center and the museum, we must have some housing. That concept has not yet been fully explored by the steering committee. Last year, when the Lennar plan came under criticism by the community, the overwhelming objection outside of the process used were about the housing in the Lennar plan. Why so much housing, or why any housing at all? It was these objections about housing that politicized the issue and that ultimately led to the ousting of the 2 incumbent city council members in last November's election. In this outreach plan being developed by the steering committee, the community deserves to be educated on the critical role housing must play in order to deliver the amenities most of us want for any downtown development. Livermore has a long and successful history of stopping housing developments in their tracks. Overcoming this aversion to housing is a big task. Many citizens don't understand why housing is necessary and important for this downtown plan to be successful. And for most of us, the financing for this development is just a little fuzzy. It is ultimately your job to help us understand we need housing to develop, housing to help pay the bill, and we need housing in this development to support and activate the public space and park proposed for the plans. Convincing people about this is an uphill climb. More work is needed before this gets to the public input phase. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rounds. Gene King, Tom Souls, Jan Bravant.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much. I have speaking for myself, and I'm also speaking for someone else who gave me something to read. Okay, I think it would be good to have an additional steering committee meeting to review the presentation material. We have spent a long time working on this project, and if we have to delay it for a few weeks to make the final things, I think it's worth it. The steering committee members were given the opportunity at the June 29th meeting or following it to make suggested changes to the presentation materials for the outreach. These included more explanation of the traffic impact of the different plans, comparison of the impact of the hotel on the east or west side, square footage of the residential units, and changes to specific site plans. We also need to understand the facts, such as the town common open space needs to be activated with such things as housing, retail, and hotel. I think we need another meeting to go over the final things. After having spent 3 months on it, I think it's a shame to cut the steering committee short if we haven't all come to the final conclusions. And then I also would like to read a comment from Jim Murray, who could not be here this evening. He says, I have been following the work of the steering committee and I applaud them for what they've accomplished. It was a very complicated process. Thank you for all your time and effort. After reviewing the 4 downtown plans that are still being considered, I strongly prefer the West Side plan. The elevated town commons is a very creative design, and the West Side Hotel location balances better with the location of the comparably sized Bankhead Theater. I think it would add significantly to the appeal of our downtown. Further, it provides parking at the hotel and avoids the added traffic congestion created by the need for valet parking for the East Side Hotel. My primary concern at this point is that there's be an agreed-upon, unbiased set of specifications and attractive features for each of the plans, which are to be presented in the outreach material. I raise this issue because the attractive features of the East and West Side Hotel locations with pluses and minuses that were presented at the last workshop by PlaceWorks were clearly, although perhaps inadvertently, biased. For example, valet parking was listed as a plus for the East Side hotels and not even mentioned for the West Side hotels. In fact, valet parking in the to-be-built parking garage across Railroad Avenue is necessary for the East Side locations in order for them to be viable, in spite of the added traffic congestion due to trips to and from the parking garage. The West Side hotels on the other side can have valet or client parking at the hotel with no additional car trips on Railroad and Livermore Avenues. Also, the specifications about views from the hotel contain factual errors. I understand that PlaceWorks is planning to address these particular issues. However, it is imperative that the City Council review all the outreach material very carefully to ensure its validity and fairness. And I think it would be a good idea to, again, have another meeting of the steering committee so that these things can be worked out. Thank you. Jim, that was Jim Murray.
Thank you, Ms. King. Tom Souls, Jan Brevant, Richard Dietz.
Good evening, Mayor Marchand and Council. My name's Tom Souls. I live at 790 Treviso Circle. I'm just going to make a couple general comments that represent sort of my personal feelings. First of all, I think that this particular plot of land is extremely important. You are going to define Livermore by how you develop that land. It's going to be the first thing people are going to see when they come to Livermore, and it's going to be where they want to be. And I'm sure you know that, and that's why you bought the land, so that it wouldn't just be used at, some expedient purpose. I also think that the city, in my opinion, has done a great job of developing, revitalizing First Street. And they made it an attractive place for people to come, and people come. And I'm sure we don't want the development that's going to be right behind that to detract from it or overwhelm it, but rather enhance and complement it. Now, my personal feeling, I was in favor of converting the land in that parking lot to, instead of a parking lot, being a city park with grass, trees, landscape, fountains, whatever, pavilion. No residential units, no 5-story parking garage, no clutter of large buildings. My daughter, who works with destination management organizations all around the country, disagrees. And your daughter always wins in these discussions. She says that having some mixed-use structures around the city park is important. It's important to the vitality of the park, and it can be done in an attractive way in keeping with the theme of the town. She points to Hamilton County, Indiana, which she says has done a good job of this with several city parks. I still prefer maximizing the open space, not overwhelming First Street, and I'm very hopeful that the City Council and the steering committee, I'm really hopeful that they will come up with a very attractive area that will really be the centerpiece of this town and welcome everyone to Livermore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Souls. Jan Brevant, Richard Dietz, and Joan Green.
My name is Jan Brevant, and I have lived in Livermore most of my life. I grew up here. I, too, would like to say I think another steering committee meeting would be a good idea. I think Jean was the one that said it's a shame to do all this work and all this time and cut it just a little bit short. So I think another meeting would at this point, it's just another meeting. Because because I grew up in Livermore, I've seen lots of changes and lots of growth, and I realize we have to grow. But I also understand that Livermore wants to keep this nice country, wine country, open field kind of thing. And I believe that in the long run, that less residential downtown, I know we have to have it other places, but especially on this piece of property, more parking, more open space, and a hotel on the west side, not on the east side. And with that being said, I have a question. I don't know if I can get it answered or not, but I know there's like over 1,000 housing units throughout the town that are being built. Is our water supply, our sewage, and our electricity going to need to be upgraded to handle those, or maybe it's already been upgraded? I don't know, but I was just curious, what's going on with that. So I don't know if you can.
If you want to finish your comments, then.
Oh, that's it.
Okay. Mr. Spence, would you care to comment on that? We just reviewed a lot of.
Sure. As we heard earlier this evening, staff did go through a pretty comprehensive infrastructure analysis, public services and utility needs, and we do have sufficient capacity over the next 3-year cycle to accommodate the growth that the council approved this evening through the general plan amendments.
Thank you.
So we got you covered. Thank you. Richard Dietz, Joan Green, and Elizabeth Judge.
I've had the good fortune of attending a number of the steering committee meetings, and I am very encouraged by how they've worked through many of the issues. When we look at a 50-mile radius from Livermore, we are looking at cities that build edifices that attempt to scrape the clouds. We look in another direction and we see cities with tract housing that go on for miles and miles as if into the sunset. But Livermore is different. Livermore's culture still retains the vestiges of farming, wine growing, ranching traditions that have existed in this valley since the time of Robert Livermore. As we look at what our city has in our parks, our open spaces, our wineries, our ranches, our agriculture, when we look at building a hotel and a conference center, the first point at which many visitors will enter the city, it is important that we share our culture with them and have the open spaces within the complex so that when they see that, they understand Livermore is different. Livermore is beautiful. So I would encourage you to look at a site that has open space, and so far what I have seen, the West Side Hotel seems to promote that concept. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dietz. Joan Green, Elizabeth Judge, and Milo Nordyke.
I read a message about this meeting, and I think really in a way what my comments are a little previous. I think it would be more appropriate at the next meeting, but I will say that I'm really very concerned anyway about the fact that we haven't considered open space enough in our development here, proposed development. And the best program that I see for this, the best proposal, is the design by Mr. McCracken, which places the hotel on the west side, and I don't know if the elevated town commons is going to fly or not, but I think it's a beautiful idea. It would give us a lot of beautiful open space, added space, and at the same time be very functional. I would also hide much of the unsightly things of the parking, which some of which could be put beneath the overpass area. And anyway, I hope very much that you will consider this desire that the people had originally for more open space, and I just don't see it in any of the other programs, other proposals. So, take care. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Elizabeth Judge, Milo Nordyke, Jeff Caskey.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. On a positive note, I want to commend PlaceWorks. I thought they were going to be here tonight. On its memorandum of June 29, when it provides minutes of the June 22nd meeting of the steering committee with careful, rather thorough summaries of public input. I found it most helpful, and I hope such a practice will continue throughout the outreach activities. Also, PlaceWorks has managed to provide the public with more options than would have happened otherwise. It also defended those options in spite of efforts at the last meeting to drop one of the alternatives. Having said that, I do have grave concerns about materials which will be presented to public citizens as they prepare to provide input for this process. For example, on page 9 and 10 of PlaceWorks' overview of key background information for the meeting number 8 of the steering committee, it lists positive and negative aspects of an East versus West hotel site comparison. Clearly, someone was told to put the best spin on the East Side Hotel idea, and they did quite a good job of it. They produced the best example of fake news since recent tweets from the White House. One person's plus is another person's minus. For example, 1, surface access from Railroad Avenue for an East Side hotel is listed as a plus. But this is a minus to those concerned about semi-tractor trailer trucks having to back into the hotel's loading docks while blocking lanes on Railroad Avenue. And that's right across from the entrance and exit of the I Street garage. 2, a plus is given for, quote, adequate parking supply at I Street garage via valet, end quote. Brilliant. But it should also include a minus for no on-site parking. 3, the view from North Livermore Avenue before the railroad underpass is more affected by the site of the ugly railroad bridge than anything else. The new garage and trees will cover up most of 3 floors of any hotel on the east side and block some of the hotel's view to the north. 4, the final 2 plus items are redundant. Quote, no adjacent uses to create potential incompatibilities, end quote, is really the same notion as, quote, standalone site enhances developer certainty, end quote. Accordingly, the section for the west side is biased in the opposite direction. And while the outrageous bias may seem amusing, and perhaps it's not intended, it is totally inappropriate from a company hired by the council and paid for by us Livermore citizens who will be victimized by it directly. Decisions are made only as good as the information provided. Let's let all the facts, all the true facts, hang out and let citizens decide the plus or the minus. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Judge. Milo Nordyke, Jeff Caskey, Don Milanese.
Thank you. Well, I must say I've been impressed by this group of 20 people who were pulled together to give the motion here, the activity, a widespread view of the population of Livermore. It's really an interesting way to approach it. And I think they've done a very good job of putting the priorities on the right things. The only thing that bothers me is the continued consideration for the East Side Hotel. I think the possibility of a West Side Hotel for a conference center is a unique opportunity, and I certainly hope that that's the way this ends up. Other than that, I think it's been a very well done process, and I'm very happy to have a good chance to monitor it as it goes along. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nordyke. Jeff Caskey, Don Milanese, William Dunlop.
Evening again, Mayor and Council. I'm Jeff Caskey, and I had the good fortune of serving on the DSC. So I'm here advocating for an additional meeting for the opportunity to review and discuss the content prepared by the consultants for presentation to council. In the preliminary version of the content, there were significant questions, clarifications, and corrections. Though some of the actual content will be generated by the consultants, the public will perceive this as a product of the steering committee. So I think it's important for the steering committee to have one last look at the content before it goes to the council for public viewing. There was concern that the process be fact-based, yet already I see that a local blog article is entitled "Controversy Swirls as 3 products are sent to council and steering committee concludes its work." Actually, you have in front of you a request to continue the work, and the content generated includes at least 4 map sets and a set of overview slides and an outreach plan. I won't take a position on their swirling controversy. Obviously, you're not going to get everyone on board with facts, but I think it's important that the steering committee get to make use of one more meeting to get the facts out before this becomes a piece of the public material. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caskey. Don Milanese, William Dunlop, Denise Ledden.
Good evening, Council. Don Milanese, 2427 Chateau Way. I also want to encourage another meeting of the steering committee, especially with regard to the whole issue of traffic flow. I can't believe we are still discussing whether the hotel should be on the east or west side of Livermore Avenue. I thought the last election ended that discussion. I thought the people spoke loud and clear when they voted out 2 council members who supported the East Side plan that benefited the developer's vision for Livermore. My concern is the additional traffic that a hotel will generate. This weekend, we had a friend from Oakland here for the Shakespeare Festival at Tesla, on Tesla Avenue at Wenty's. She'd been coming to Livermore for several years, and this time she was shocked at how congested it was to come into downtown on Livermore Avenue. It's already a problem, and you need to minimize the additional traffic as much as possible. Anyone coming into Livermore to stay in a new hotel would travel south on Livermore Avenue from 580. If the hotel is on the larger west side, a visitor would simply make a right turn to the hotel and park the car in the adjacent parking, and that would be done. But if the hotel were on the east side of Livermore Avenue, a visitor would have to make a left turn mid-block across oncoming traffic traveling north. And that move across the traffic would happen a second time when the valet returns the car to the visitor at the end of his or her stay. And the traffic congestion would be compounded even further when the valet parks the car wherever that will be, and later has to retrieve it, probably on Railroad Avenue. Additionally, service trucks entering and exiting the back entrance of an East Avenue side hotel will cause even more problems on Livermore Avenue, which is already too busy. If after that message Livermore citizens send in the last election, you still need a reason to build a hotel on the west side, just please consider the traffic problems. Please consider the traffic problems, and before you make any decisions, order a thorough traffic study that contrasts the projected traffic that each site will generate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Milanese. William Dunlop, Denise Ledden, Susan Steinberg.
Bill Dunlop, and I've been here before. And I do want to comment that I think the committee that has been put together is trying to do a very good job and put a lot of effort into this, and I really appreciate the time and effort they've put in. Some of us have been on vacation at various times and places and could not attend a number of the meetings, which I apologize for because I wanted to be there. But I must say, I'll make my statement very short. I think very highly of the comments you just received about the issues of east and west on the road. And I think that from that you need to hold at least one more meeting to get a final position of the committee before you go out to the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunlop. Denise Ledden, Susan Steinberg, Lee Yonker.
Good evening. I'm Denise Ledden. I've been to each of the Downtown Steering Committee meetings except for one that I couldn't attend. I went mainly because I wanted to see what the process, it's incredible, an incredible amount of work, but I could see the amount of rush. So I too feel that the steering committee needs another meeting. I do like the West Side McCracken Hotel plan because it has a lot more space than the others. I like the micro units, the co-housing in this plan. This residential concept provides for housing for artists, and it won't overwhelm the space of having that open space. I don't care for the Presidio Hotel presented on the east side. Even with different facades, it will not represent us in Livermore. It's not what I think of when I hear boutique hotel. It's got this boxy Motel 6 look. And what else could the developer do with such a small space? It just doesn't work. It will create traffic and delivery service problems. The East Side Hotel just doesn't work. The West Side U-shaped hotel is lovely. It's got an open, airy green feeling. I can see myself at restaurants overlooking these green spaces on the West Side. Any visitor to town would enjoy this too. The West Side, I'll skip this. We have a lot of other places to build townhomes, and I'm seeing that happen. Not on this town square. Please make Livermore unique. Thank you, West Side Hotel.
Thank you, Ms. Ledden. Susan Steinberg, Lee Yonker, Richard Ryan.
Thank you for your patience. I was coming as fast as my little Bobby Orr legs would go, as Peanuts used to say. I've been faithfully attending all the steering committee meetings, and I've been distressed by the amount of rancor that showed up in the last few meetings, especially the final meeting, where it was it descended to verbal fisticuffs, with some people being very rude to others. And there certainly needs to be another meeting, if only to make sure that people don't end up with bad memories of their interactions. I think those members who were on the steering committee can testify that it was quite rancorous at the end, and that's not the way we want Livermore's steering committee to present to the city council. It's obvious that there's never going to be complete agreement because there's a faction for a hotel on this side, hotel on that side. But I'd like to remind everybody that in the meetings last summer, when they had the city meetings where everybody was around little tables of 8 and they had to evaluate different concepts for the city plans, that 10 of the tables preferred the west side, only 6 preferred the east side. That was before this even got started. I would like to put my oar in for the west side for reasons of space and non-congestion of traffic, and also because not everybody loves valet parking, but there's no other option on the east side. And a consultant may say it's the thing to do, but not everybody in Livermore wants that thing to do. What the council has to bear in mind also is that there was a suggestion that there be no presentation in the newspapers to the city, to citizens. And that's always been a very, very important part of Livermore's way of grasping an issue. They can see it all laid out in print. I don't think there's any danger that the papers will adulterate it with fake news. If the city has plans to show, they ought to be laid out in great depth and breadth in the newspapers, as well as anything else that's being presented. People do read in this town, and they do pause and consider what they've read. I really hope that if the city does get some plans together that they will consider what the effect of last year's meetings were, as well as this year's meetings. The public hasn't had much chance to chime in at the steering committee the way it did last year and the free-for-alls, but it certainly needs to, and it needs all the information it can get. Thank you.
Lee Yonker and Richard Ryan.
Hi. Given Council Werner's comments, I'm going to change a bit what I say. It's clear over the past year that citizens sent very, very strong signals about how much they cared about this project and their views of that project. And given that range of views, I think it's clear to most people that supporters and advocates for a town square quality hotel, affordable housing, convenient and adequate parking, those people have got to come together. And we got to come up with some kind of dual plan that shows how you blend those elements into a plan that actually works for Livermore. What is the way to do that? I'm impressed with the steering committee, short of the rancor that was discussed, in that this is a process that is looking at how you bring things, views together. What I'd like to comment on, and I'm changing the focus here, is the McCracken process, not the result, but the actual process that has happened in that. Many people just look at the final map. I want to give you some insight into the process. We have found that there's enormous value in taking a very talented architect and taking a range of views on what are the elements, what are the issues, pumping it through the eyes and the expertise of that individual, and have them come back with options. You can't do this, you can do this. That process has been going on for a while. We got a lot of new information from the steering committee and the experts that is fed into that process. And I just want to do one closing element. You're going to hear more from me later, but I want to do one closing element, and that is, we got 8 acres over here. We got a downtown that's thriving. By what mechanism are we going to connect those two and make it something that really works? And one of the things that McCracken has done exceedingly well is to look at how the pieces fit together. How does what we're planning to do fit with what is already there? And big issues like the adequacy and distribution of parking, the traffic flow problems, the ways to ensure that a town square can be activated. You can't just build a hotel over here and say you'll put a town square over there. You got to think about the entire integrated site, and that's something that McCracken does exceedingly well. How it blends architecturally with the existing downtown, and basically, how does this whole thing fit? I think that's the big issue. We aren't anywhere near answering those questions from the 4 plans that are laid out. Someone has to sit down and say, let's look at this, let's look at the existing downtown. I strongly recommend a process that gets some kind of integration with someone that is looking at the entire site, not we'll put this over here and we'll staple it to this over there and we'll staple that to this here. This thing needs an integrated look, and I encourage you, as you move forward, clearly there's a need for one more meeting, but there's a need for more integration well beyond one more meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Richard Ryan.
I'll just wrap up and say I really agree with most of the comments of previous speakers. It's been my impression that this whole process has been rushed to the point where there isn't quite agreement amongst these very talented people on the steering committee yet, and they need at least one more meeting, maybe more. I would not want you to define that too tightly, because these are really a bunch of very talented people that I think can come to some sort of consensus as to what to present to you folks and to the rest of the community, and that may require a bit more time. For instance, one of the items that has come up is the ratio of housing to commercial development, and it was stated that there's sort of a formula for this. Well, that formula sort of disappeared, and became really kind of mushy. They haven't really considered the surrounding things. You just talked tonight about new housing very close to this area, and that hasn't been integrated into this plan that's being developed here. So I think that there just needs to be a whole lot more time spent on this before a final report comes to you folks. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Okay, that's all the cards that I have. So I'm going to close the comment period and bring it back to the council. And I guess the first person I'd like to talk with is the chair of the committee, Councilor Carling.
Gee, thanks. So, as Councilmember Warner suggested, we had two things to discuss. One was rescheduling, whether we can reschedule to the 7th, and whether or not we could have another meeting of the steering committee before the presentation to the council. And the other was whether we include the steering committee at that meeting or not. And I don't know that anybody spoke to that particular point, but I assume that everybody would agree that they'd like to participate. As I understand it, the problem is that we can't get a quorum. And I'm going to look to Steve and Paul. I mean, are there options? I mean, we could decide, I suppose, we could decide not to do it on the 7th and try and find another date for where we could get a quorum. But let me also make another point. Because we discussed this earlier today, and that's again the problem, is we don't have a quorum. But we heard from a certain group largely tonight, not some of the other people on the committee. And some of them are here and many of them are not. And there were certainly some people in that group on the committee that were kind of finished. They were done with it. They thought we had reached the point with the plans that they didn't want to talk about it anymore. And so, irrespective of the fact that we don't have enough people for this week, I think, which is the day we were looking for, is the 13th. There are some people that just don't want to participate anymore. So I'm not sure what we do about that. I mean, I think it's been a good set of meetings. I was a little surprised at the comment about the rancor amongst the committee, but I also, if you recall, I admonished some of the public for some of the comments they made as well. Because I thought some of the comments that we had during the public opportunity was also pretty insensitive and demeaning to the people that had spent time in the steering committee, which may play a part in some of the people not wanting to continue with the group. So I think we all need to take some ownership in that, not just the folks on the steering committee, but some of the public as well. I don't know where we go from here. I think the other remark that I'll make is there was never, ever an expectation that we were going to reach consensus. What we were going to reach was an outreach program, what we were going to establish, and it was an outreach program to the public and give them some options to consider. And the 4 plans as they stand today are different. There's obviously 2 with an East Side Hotel and 2 with a West Side Hotel, but they differ in the amount of open space. They differ in the amount of residential versus retail and so on and so forth. And the expectation is that we want to use those as starting points, not final development plans at all, for the public to comment on. And so, I mean, this was never expected to reach consensus. And obviously, we had people on representing vastly different points of view on the committee, and that's to be expected. And you can't expect to reach consensus on a final plan, as some people were hoping, on the in that particular committee. That wasn't the intent of the committee. I do think the points about the integration and how it works with the existing First Street and so on and so forth is an interesting point that we hadn't tackled yet, but I think it's something that's going to be important after we get the information, or as we get the information from the public. I think that's a really good point. Somebody talked about the final position of the committee. I don't know that there is a final position. We're going to have a set of plans that we hope will be presented to the public to get their feedback and be able to integrate that information into what is taken then to council for consideration. So those are some of my initial thoughts. I would like to figure out how we can get another additional meeting.
Well,
I don't know how we're going to do it.
Let's check with the vice chair. Councilmember Warner, your comments.
Yeah, I've got. I'd like to sort of get my observations in here on the process. I come back to the purpose of the committee is outreach and how to come up with a variety of plans in which we can actually get the community input. And I think what we saw tonight actually is fairly representative of what we've been dealing with on the steering committee, is that there are some very passionate views by people who have already made up their mind. And so what you'll see here is advocacy for East Side, West Side, and a lot of reasons. And what we're really about is gathering the facts and putting them out there in front of the public with a set of options so that we can get the input. So when people make comments like, I don't even know why you're even thinking about more than my option, it's like, what are you talking about? We need to get outreach. We need to get the community input. So, and I do want to say is I'm really didn't know what we were getting into, but the process we've gone through, we have actually developed a set of options that represent what we truly have here. Now, I think the other thing to keep in mind is if you look at those options, they weren't just like, oh, let me put one thing here and there and everything, but all of the options in some way or another have attempted to be integrated. They are, if you look at them, fairly responsive to what we learned from the experts. Each option is itself self-consistent. We have had, people mention parking studies. We've got the parking studies. One example of the East Side, West Side, you put the hotel on one side, you're talking about a difference between 16-second wait and a 21-second wait. So you're talking 5 seconds in that case. But actually, that doesn't comport with people's, frankly, preconceived notions, and therefore it's rejected. So we do have we have several issues that have surfaced in the steering committee. First of all, what are the facts? And I do believe that one of the jobs of the steering committee is to establish those facts. And we have heard from the experts, and I do believe that the committee will put forth, this is what we heard, this is what we believe. And so that's a very valuable thing. And in fact, we've gone through several iterations of, okay, several presentations, this is what we heard. Anybody got raising any objections to that? There hasn't been anything, any countervailing facts by an expert. There's been hearsay, but not no other equivalent presentation. So I think we've got very valuable output as to what is. One of the things, I'll just point this out, and I'll mention it here and on camera, is John Stein very early on in the process put forth a set of questions that you should think about in evaluating the design. I put together another set and asked for other people to put in the questions. How do you think about this, and how do we know when we've actually got a coherent, integrated view? So I think you've also heard in some of the comments tonight fairly prejudicial language against one side versus another. Actually, it's been, only against one side has been prejudicial. I think we have to, at this point, keep an open mind. And I find it, given the comments, frankly, a lot of minds are not open. And I think that's what we need to have at this stage. So the getting now to the point of what we're trying to talk about tonight, one is we don't have the ability before the, to have another meeting without delaying the whole process. So really what's before us and what we heard is we need more time. Let's spend whatever additional time is needed. And that's possible, but as Councilmember Carling pointed out, some people are kind of done. So my suggestion is that the way we handle this is we do have one more meeting, and that meeting is jointly with the council, and we get to it. Because I think that the plans are in pretty good shape for outreach. What we didn't really do very well as a committee is actually focus on outreach, because there was so much. Here, look at my plan. This is a good plan. Why don't we just get behind this plan, right? And it really is not about that. It's really, how do we think about the problem? So I think that we solve the problem by, on the 7th, having the meeting. It will be a meeting of the steering committee, and it will be a meeting of the council. And I absolutely believe that the steering committee members, if for no other reason, they need to be honored and being able to have the interchange with the council, and we get through the issues. I mean, we made a lot of progress, but we have some issues that we need to resolve. And I don't think that another meeting before that would be particularly helpful. But actually, as we've heard, it's moot. So I'm in favor of, we switch the meeting to the 7th, or whatever date it is.
August 7th.
August 7th. We make it joint, and we get to it. And it's the only topic on the meeting. Well, I guess we have this other one. But, I mean, we just focus on this and we get it done. I think we've gone through a lot. It's been exhausting. Bottom line, I think we've got some very good products, and now we should focus on how do we truly engage the community with discussing the options.
Vice Mayor?
All right. It's a little bit difficult to comment on this because I'm in the dark as not being a participant on the committee. So I'm relying on what I'm hearing up here tonight to form opinions, and it's very unfortunate that I hear that some people are just burnt out and don't want to participate anymore. I want to thank every single committee member who they've put in a tremendous amount of work in a short period of time. And the ultimate goal was to steer us during the public outreach process, because guess what? It hasn't started yet. We have yet to start the public outreach process for this phase of downtown. So any product, any suggestion, it is merely a whiff of an idea for us to launch the public process with. I would not be shocked if the end result looks nothing like any of the initial proposals that we start this public process with. Many times when you're talking of a project of this importance and this scale, what you begin with is not what you end up with. And that's a result of the public process. And one of the things that I've, throughout my time on the Planning Commission and here on the council, I've always been amazed, and backing up a bit, as a staff member for a municipality and being on the other end as both a resident and a staff member, I always had the assumption that, hey, the council members, they show up and they have their minds made up. They know how they're going to vote on every issue. They've read the staff report and that's it. But my experience on the Planning Commission and the council, one of the more shocking items is the public process. And there have been many times where I've gone through staff reports and I've begun to form an opinion. And I think, well, maybe I'm leaning this way. And you get that one person that shows up and makes that one comment, and it completely changes your mind on a project. And that's what the public process is supposed to do. And that's what we're looking for direction and guidance with this public process. So trying to quit rambling here, I think the main goal of the steering committee was to hack out some of these issues and to come to a general understanding of what we're dealing with before we move forward, not saying there are 5 projects, it's going to be one of these projects, let's go out to the public, pick a project and move forward. So we have yet to begin the input, the public process. I think a meeting with the steering committee members and the council would be beneficial for myself to get direct input from all the steering committee members. I want each and every steering committee member to feel that we have heard their opinion and we are hearing their message at the end of this process. And I think the only way to do that is if we do have a joint committee meeting and we do, we give each committee member, more than a 3-minute opportunity during a council presentation to summarize their months of work. I want some back and forth. I want to be able to ask questions. I want to be able to answer questions from committee members. So if we can do that on the 7th, that would be great. I'm preparing for a staff groan on this one. I'd be willing to also throw out August 5th or 12th. Those are Saturdays. I think an evening on the 7th, at least from what I'm hearing here, can't make it earlier than the 7th, I'm hearing. So why is that? Is that the formation of the plan? You're not in town. Okay, so we have a key council member who's not available. But, if I wasn't available, I'd make myself available for this. But anyway, just saying.
I'll remember that.
Yeah. Well, I have lots of vacation hours because I never take it. But anyway, August 12th then, or any other Saturday, I'd be willing to commit a little bit more time to this. I don't want to start possibly at 7 o'clock and then everybody, like what's happening to me right now, I'm starting to kind of really fade out here, and everybody's patience wear thin. So I'd like to throw that option out, but I do think a joint meeting with whatever committee members can stomach one last chance to speak with the council and outlay any concerns that they have about the process, any final thoughts in a constructive, hopefully civil manner. So that's what I'd propose.
Councilmember Coomber.
If I may, and I'll be fairly brief here. I really want to extend my thanks to the other 2 Bobs on the council for the work they've done with the steering committee. Councilmember Carling for leading the steering committee through, and Councilmember Warner for offering much needed good advice. I stand with the Vice Mayor in that I've kept myself purposely in the dark and kind of concentrated on the other side of things, the financial part of it, which we didn't address a bit tonight, which is going to play a huge part in how we move forward with this. But we are so far away from picking one of 4 plans. If it is your idea that 4 plans will be presented to us and we'll just toss them up in the air and see which one flies with the majority of us, that's not going to happen. So prepare that this is going to be a well thought out endeavor, that we're going to be marching towards what we feel is the best course for downtown. We know the last public meetings last year were, I can't say necessarily constructive, but we got through them. A lot of information was gained, a lot of information was provided, and we got a good idea what a lot of people want downtown. We just haven't seen it in a way that we can make sure that we can deal with financially. The city has a huge responsibility to use your money correctly, our money, since we're all residents of Livermore. We want to make sure that it's used right, in the right way, that nobody's driving 6 blocks out of the way to avoid looking at it down there. It has run that course a little bit in previous plans. But we intend, I think, to take our time making this happen. It isn't going to be a freight train running downstream until things get built and put up there. We want to hear more from you, and we want to ask more questions. So my thanks also to Mr. Stewart for giving us the report tonight, too. I really appreciate it. Staying up late tonight. That's good. Thanks so much. I think that's better, yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Again, I'd like to commend all the people that have been working so hard on the steering committee. It's this isn't easy, and I recognize that. And the rancor, it troubles me to hear that. But I've been involved in a number of these processes where I have watched people storm out of the room saying, "This is my own time. I don't need to be here and be abused." And I have seen that in workshops where people get very passionate and they become very rancorous and very rude. And it troubles me that people that we've asked to volunteer their time to be part of this process felt that way, and they're done. As you pointed out, you can only put up with so much abuse. You can only have so much fun, and some people have just had it. How did we get here? How did we possibly get to this point? Well, it's funny. This coming Friday, it'll be a year from when we had the workshop, the Bastille Day. I'll never forget it. So we came to this, and it's troubling when I hear people tonight saying that, oh, well, this was decided in the last election. The hotel is here. No, the last election was about 260 housing units. That's what the last election, that had the flyers with the bulldozers going into the downtown, and that's what it was. It was 260 housing units. And what's remarkable is to hear a number of people in this audience tonight talk about their concerns about the horrific traffic impact of a 135-room hotel, when those very same people spoke in favor of 400 housing units on this same site and a 2,000-seat theater, 2,400 people. And we're quibbling about a 135-room hotel. Really? And changing the narrative that everybody going to this hotel, that no one going to this hotel, a wine country hotel, no one is going to be going to this hotel from the wine country. Stunning. What we're here tonight to do is to figure out an outreach process, because what we found is what we've been doing doesn't work. Because we heard from the community that they wanted 400 housing units. That's why the city spent $14 million of affordable housing money to acquire the site. That's why we bought the site, is we heard from the community that this is what they wanted. They wanted 400 housing units in the downtown. And then when the redevelopment agency went away, we came back and we cut the housing by 40%. And then what we heard is the community doesn't want any housing down there. And that was the result of the election. It wasn't about the hotel placement. It was surely about the housing. So we've heard a lot of different things from the community. But now we're trying to figure out, we've heard from a narrow slice of the community, because we see a lot of the same people over and over again. And the reason for this outreach is to get a broader range of the community to find out what the community as a whole wants. And the city council is ultimately going to make the decision on this. So we're not going to take the 4 plans and say, okay, this is what it is. We're taking plan number 2. No, we're going to look at all the elements, and we're establishing what the facts are. And then we're going to take those facts, go out to the community in a broad outreach. Because remember, the workshops that we had, and we've heard people say, well, just had a lot of workshops. The workshops that we have gave us BART in the downtown. It gave us BART in the downtown. And then we found out that 80% of the people did not want BART in the downtown. But yet that's where the workshop process took us. So what we need is to get a broad outreach. It's going to involve polling. It's going to involve a variety of different efforts to find out what the community wants. And ultimately, the council, based on that community input, is going to come up with the ultimate plan. And a large consideration is going to be, how do we pay for this? How do we maintain this? And those are going to be parts of the considerations that we, as the council, have been elected to determine in the best interest of the community. And that's what we have to do, is find out what the community wants. And that's been such an important part of this, because, as I said, we've heard from all over the map, from people that are in this room tonight, that have said they want everything from 400 housing units to no housing units. So how do we find out what the community at large wants? And that's how we got here. And that's, I really appreciate the people that have been on that steering committee, because I've been in the firing line before, and I understand this. So this is how we got here. So I appreciate the idea of having another meeting the majority of, and we'll never get consensus, but it appears from Mr. Stewart's comments that there was a majority that moved forward 3 or 4 plans for the council to consider. And I'm good with that. We don't need to keep tweaking these things over and over, because the council's going to do that. We're going to take these, get community input, and ultimately figure out where this is going to be successful. We want something to get built. We want it to be sustainable, successful, something that does not require a long-standing subsidy of public dollars, something that's going to work. And we want something that's beautiful and something that we can all be proud of. That goes without saying. But this is how we've gotten here, and this is how the process is going to continue to work. And ultimately, we're going to make that decision. So with that, I think you had another comment.
Yeah, I have one more comment, then I'll make a motion. But you just, your last comments about the housing, I'm personally astounded, and I've mentioned this in the steering committee meeting. People are alluding to the last election and what it meant and all of that, and we'll see. But the group that made a big deal out about the housing, turns out that the plan that is being advocated, the McCracken plan, has got the most housing of all the options. I just want to point that out. It's just a little interesting to see the pivot, the spin, and what we're really talking about. You can see it going on tonight, and you should have no illusions. We're trying to do outreach, we're trying to have an open mind, and what you're seeing real time is the campaign for a particular outcome, as opposed to getting input. So I completely agree with Vice Mayor Spadowski and the others. This is not about picking a plan, choosing which of the 40. We're not going to go on and say, here are 4 plans. Which one do you want? 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay, most votes on this one. That's it, done. That's not the way this is going to work. So I just implore everyone, keep an open mind, keep the campaign out of this until we get true outreach. But what you see in all of the comments that were, practically all of them, they're already being positioned for advocating an outcome as opposed to outreach. So I just suggest we back up and we truly focus on outreach. So with that,
Wait a minute, before you make a motion, I need some clarification. I think the people that spoke tonight want another meeting of the steering group, not with us.
Oh.
First.
Well, they didn't say not with us at the same time.
Well, no, but I think that was the point, was my understanding was, based on some of the steering committee comments during the steering committee and so on, that the steering committee would like another meeting with just the steering committee to look at the materials before being presented to the city council. So I think we need, that's what I think people were advocating tonight.
Okay, so if I could just...
Not what you were going to make a motion about.
What was I going to... Well,
you were going to make a motion to have the meeting on the 7th and include the steering committee.
Well, so here's the way we can... I was just trying to call the question, really. Okay. The point is, we know that we can't get a quorum before the 7th. So we have a couple of choices down this path. One is we can say we can just punt until there's a time to get another steering committee meeting together and then go down this path. Or we could do what Vice Mayor Spadowski said, and we can wait until we have a Saturday and we can spend the whole Saturday. But what I'm going to suggest, so what we can vote it up or down. But so what I am seeing is there is, from what I understand from staff, there is no practical opportunity to have another steering committee meeting before the 7th.
Well, let me just interject. So is the purpose of another meeting to further develop an outreach plan, or is it continue to refine the advocacy of a single plan?
I think the latter.
Well, and there's no point in doing that because I don't.
I'm not arguing with that,
but that's not the purpose of the committee.
Fair enough, but I just wanted to make sure that we are all, the 5 of us, understand that most of what the comments tonight about another meeting was not what you were going to propose.
But it was not for the purpose of the steering committee. The steering committee purpose was the outreach.
I agree.
But what we've heard tonight was to change the purpose of the steering committee into advocacy.
Well, I'm not sure. I wouldn't. Maybe advocacy is too strong a word. I think everybody wanted one last look at whatever else somebody else was going to present.
Yeah. So how they can tweak it to.
Well, that, and I think, to the point about the pluses and minuses, I do think that wasn't very well done, frankly, and so I think there was a lot of concern about the way the pluses and minuses were done, and I think justifiably. And I do think that PlaceWorks was cognizant of that, and certainly the conversation I had with him today, I think he doesn't have a particular agenda in mind, nor does he have a particular idea where things ought to go. So he's trying to be as conscientious and objective about this whole process as he can be. I just wanted to make sure that we all understood that, again, irrespective of what the intent was, the messages tonight was to have another steering committee meeting of just the steering committee. That's what everybody was talking about.
Right.
Now, we can't do that, but I was just making sure that was clear to everybody up here.
No, I think it was
Okay.
It was clear.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought that was clear.
Okay.
So you're going to make a motion?
That's why I used the word moot. It's my understanding, I'll ask again, can we have another steering committee meeting before the 7th? Is that possible?
You don't currently have a date with a quorum of your committee. So if you did have a meeting, you would be with less than a quorum.
And there's no point in that. So what we started with, maybe, I don't know, an hour ago, was the fact that it was moot. We did have a bunch of people say, it doesn't matter if it's moot, I want one anyway, so that's fine. But what I'm saying is we have 2 choices. One is we take advantage of the 7th, where we can get enough people to show up, we can have a joint discussion, and we can actually maybe work through some of these issues. I don't think that the material can be or needs to be further perfected. I mean, it's good enough, because what we're really talking about is outreach. And it's, and how do we do the outreach, not whether this is the perfect plan, right? It's a big difference, and it seems to be lost on people. But so with that, I believe that it would be very useful to have a joint meeting with the steering committee and the council, see what we have, and then go from there. And I think we should we need to keep, as you point out, it's been a year. We can't, and then maybe it's been 10 years, depending on how you look at it. But I think we ought to get moving, have a meeting, and not keep delaying. So I move that we have a joint council steering committee meeting on August 7th to look at the materials and get further direction on how to do outreach. So,
is there a second?
I'll second. Yeah.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Do we have discussion on the motion?
Yeah. I think the joint meeting, well, technically you are getting another meeting of the steering committee. So I just think that if there are any concerns, it will serve the same purpose as having another committee meeting. So if you have any concerns about the presentation, you could be there and actively participate and criticize plus minuses, one plan or another. You're going to have the time to make your points. That's the whole goal, is that you need an additional opportunity to make points that you felt that are lacking or haven't been heard or whatever. It's your last chance to download and to let us know and for us to go back and forth. So I think a joint meeting serves the same purpose as a singular committee meeting followed up by you have 3 minutes at a council meeting when we get the presentation. I don't know if there should be any discussion about my whole Saturday meeting idea. I see lots of shaking heads. I see staff saying, heck no. Yeah, but or if it doesn't have to be that particular day, we can find another potential day that works. I'm just concerned about the time. I think it's with that many members of the committee, and if we're going to have a meaningful back and forth, I don't know if we're going to get it all done in one night, as long as we're prepared to carry it over to another one. But I think it's a pretty heavy lift, and I've finally made the city manager twitch and go for his mic. So,
one item we could look at a Saturday. We did not poll the 19 members of the steering committee nor the 5 members of you. Our experience has been that we're hitting about 1 out of 6 meeting dates that we actually poll. So when we actually landed on the 7th and got just over a quorum of the steering committee and all 5 of you, we were so excited. The second item was that you have a special meeting on that date. So you can start whatever time you wish. If you wish to have a 6 p.m. start, that is certainly something you could do. That would give you essentially, for all practical purposes, 5 working hours. If you did it on a Saturday, we wouldn't recommend you spend more time than that anyway. Sure. If you need more time than that, then you need multiple meetings, because your ability to carry on as a group fades after that sort of amount of time. So that could be one option.
Thinking more of a workshop kind of deal, but I think 2 of us would have a conflict, but I believe the LAVTA Board of Directors meeting would be canceled for August. I think we discussed that earlier today, so there's no reason to meet in August. So that would work for Councilmember Coomer and myself then, if LAVTA is indeed canceled. So
what, on the 7th? On the
7th. Oh. Yeah, it starts at 4:00, but yeah, that's kind of that's always a rough.
So to Council Member or Vice Mayor Spadowski's point, how will we organize a meeting so that there is, back and forth, give and take, and that sort of thing, to get the discussion, to have a rich discussion about this, rather than, not that this is a terrible way to conduct business, but I mean, the public gets to speak for 3 minutes and then we don't hear from them again.
You will be doing 2 things that evening. You will have two bodies meeting simultaneously. You have done that before with other bodies. The Planning Commission is the most notable. Generally, you have a single chair of the meeting. That would be the mayor. In this particular case, it would be the presiding officer of the two bodies. So in that case, essentially, when you have discussion, quote unquote, among yourselves, it's the 19 of you plus the three who weren't part of that 19. So essentially, that's essentially the discussion that can be dealt with either by the presiding officer, or if you delegate that authority to your consultant, which you have done in your steering committee meetings, it would be done that way. We would expect the format would be a presentation of all of the materials that have been created as a part of the process, and then there would be essentially a discussion. It's a workshop format, so traditionally you would have a single comment period. Traditionally that's at the beginning, but that is a flexible item that has been moved on occasion for the steering committee to a different point in that agenda. But you have one item on the agenda, so there's sort of one time for the public to talk. But by having essentially the steering committee and you meet jointly, you're not testifying to each other. You're essentially one body talking to itself.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other
So I have one other
yes
question along it. There's the other item that I initiated, which was the tools for limiting the housing. Is that something that we could also take care of at the beginning? Of
Yes,
the meeting?
we can certainly have that presentation on that meeting as well.
So I think it's important, and given even the amount of airtime that housing was talked about, and in the last election there was the fear raised about stack and pack like Dublin and everything else. So just remind everybody, what we're talking about is tools such that once we get the public outreach done and we're down the path of a plan, that we will also be able to pretty definitively cap the amount of housing so that we're not flip-flopping all over the place, and that the public doesn't have to have the fear that people have used in the past to, to influence an outcome. So I think it's very important, because after this meeting, we're going to look at these materials, and then we're going to start down the outreach plan, or get down there. And so there isn't another council meeting. So I just want to point out, it's going to be important to think about the tools, and presumably that can happen pretty quick. So that would be the meeting. There'll be two things. We'll talk about the tools for limiting the housing once the community has decided what that number is, and then we'll talk about the outreach plan itself.
Okay, very good. Any other comments on the motion? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed unanimously.
Was there direction on the start time?
Earlier the better.
6?
I think. Yeah.
6 o'clock?
Very good.
Question. So 6 o'clock. Will we have just kind of ballpark financial information, like what the general cost of the plans are going to be?
So yes, as a part of the report out, your finance subcommittee will be making their presentation as a part of that overall information that's presented to you.
Excellent.
So it's not a separate item, because obviously it's only about this, but that information will be presented as well.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Okay, so it's almost 11 o'clock. Let's move. I would suggest that we move the campaign financing to the next meeting. 6.03, general consensus on that? Okay. Yeah, well, we're nothing after 11 o'clock. So let's just finish up with report out and matters initiated. Councilmember Coomber.
I left my notes at home from the last meeting, so maybe I can prevail on council members to take over that. But no, I reported on all my meetings last meeting, and I have no things to initiate this evening.
Councilmember Carling.
So on June 28th, had a stop waste meeting. I know you get tired of me telling you that, but I have stop waste meetings 2 times a month.
But it's fascinating
I know
stuff, isn't
it is.
You can stop reporting.
Very lucrative.
Good,
too.
stop reporting. On the 29th, Councilmember Coomber and the mayor and I went to the Sunflower Hill celebration on their, it's getting late, their
Nonprofit of the year.
Nonprofit of the year. Thank you. It
for
was very nice.
District 16.
Assemblymember Baker hosted it out at Hageman Farms. It was a lovely event, and it was very nice. Then that evening we had a steering committee meeting, and then and I think we've heard enough about steering committee tonight. And on the 30th, Vice Mayor Spadowski and I each had an EOC tour, the current EOC, Emergency Operations Center. This is all part of my education, and I think his as well, as to what we have available today as an emergency operations center, which frankly doesn't amount to much. But it was interesting seeing what we do have and what we might do to improve it in the event of an emergency in the future. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Councilmember Warner.
Yeah, a lot of time with the downtown steering committee that we have heard enough on. So the other thing that I would want to do is I thought Loretta Caskey's idea about getting the application going. So I would want to be responsive to that and say let's do that. That was a good suggestion. So we get enough heads nodding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Vice Mayor.
You stole my matters initiated. Darn, I only have one other item to report out. Well, other than the LAVTA board meeting earlier today, we did receive some onboard survey results. We recently reconfigured the Living Daylights out of all of our routes to increase ridership, and the survey results came back the exact same as last year. So it's amazing that our survey, the riders are still just as happy with the system even after a major reconfiguration. You expect it to drop, but it actually leveled out, so that was great. I do want to take a moment to thank, we had a speaker earlier tonight mention the 4th of July celebration in downtown. That went off without a hitch. I want to thank the sponsors, the volunteers, the police, as was mentioned earlier, also the police volunteers. There were a lot of volunteers from the Citizens Police Academy who are now part of the volunteer force at the police that were there as well. But also in particular, the public services crews. They did a great job. They had their trucks lined up, ready to go and do any cleanup and get downtown back to the way it was prior to the fireworks. So I want to thank the public services crews for giving up their 4th of July so they can keep downtown orderly and clean. But other than that, don't have any other items to report out.
Okay, let's see. On June 30th, I'd like to acknowledge the great service that the city received from Chris Adams, that she is retired now, and all those proclamations that you saw, all the resolutions, Chris did those. Very creative, very talented, and she is greatly missed. So we just want to acknowledge Chris Adams, the many years that she worked for the city, and the great support that she gave for the council. On July 5th, we hosted Councilor Darrell Treese. He was out here, and they are having some very similar issues about preserving their viticulture region. He's from New Zealand. No, that's Australia. I'm sorry, it's Australia. Yeah, it's the city of Swan, Australia. And they did a search and wanted to see who did it better than anybody. And it was Livermore. So he came with the council direction to find out how Livermore was able to preserve their viticulture region, because Livermore had about 5,000 acres at the turn of the century. We were down to about 1,300, and now we're back to over 5,000. Similarly, they had about 5,000. They're down to about 1,000. So they're right about the same place that we were. So they did a worldwide search and found out that Livermore is the place that did this, and they were very interested in the South Livermore Valley Area Plan. Mark Roberts, city manager, met with them, and as did I, and he came. He was ecstatic that somebody actually figured out how to get this thing done. July 6th, we had the Tri-Valley Community Television Board meeting where we discussed the budget and the operations. Today, I was at the Alameda County Transportation Commission. We had the I-580 Express Lane Committee. 7.1 million trips on the in the last year on the express lanes. It's brought in over $9 million in revenue, and this revenue is going to stay here in the Tri-Valley for transportation projects. The usage this May over last May is up 12.6%. So the express lanes are very popular. Planning, Policy, and Legislative Committee also met. We talked about some of the proposals coming up in the state. Matters initiated. I know we've talked about bringing it back in October, but what I'd like to do is to have it brought back at the next meeting, a consideration of a policy statement on the host community impact fee. I wanted to have it done before we go into the outreach, because that is going to be figured heavily, because it talks about how much money is out there to do downtown projects, and I want to make it clear that the policy statement is made that the host community impact fee really is focused on maintaining the treasure that we have, and that's the Bankhead Theater, and that those funds should be earmarked for the Bankhead and not used for other facilities that might jeopardize the long-term success. So I'd just like to have that come back to the council next time for a policy statement. How many? Like 1, 2, 3. Okay, we're at 5. Okay, very good. Thank you.
But just sorry, one clarifying comment. I don't want to jump to any conclusions. I would like to talk about the HCIF and the projections. Right. But I mean, it would also be nice to get a little bit of history as to how it's been dedicated and why. Sure. Sorry, just coming from a North Livermore resident perspective, I'd like to know, some of the history behind the impact fees when it's impacting my neck of the woods in particular, and any opportunities that might be in North Livermore.
Sure, very good. Okay, so we got that. All right, well, very good. Thank you ever so much. Appreciate everybody's comments tonight. And with that, meeting is adjourned until July 24th.